Okay, we're live. Welcome to the live stream for September 27th, 2017. And I just realized it's really echoey in here, and I couldn't figure out why until just now. We had a big, giant couch pillow that was in here, and it's no longer in here. Ay. Okay, Narc Free. Hello. How are you? Mo is here. Welcome. I see. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can get that couch pillow back up here. How is everybody doing? Karen is here. Shara is here. Welcome, welcome. Lily, Celeste. Lots of different people hopping on tonight. That's so cool. Janice, Mateus. Oh, yay, the couch pillow is back. Oh, that's already significantly better. That's wild. Thank you so much. We need to get a more legit setup in here. That's pretty bad. Okay, thank you so much. Rick, hi. Spring, Teresa. Narc Free asks, Dana, are you still in Michigan? Yes, I am. Michigan for life. I love it here. I love Michigan. I could totally work for the Chamber of Commerce. I love Michigan so much. Purple is here. Oh my gosh. George MB says, hey, Dana, I have to work early now. I'm in the UK, but I waited until you streamed until I slept. Oh my gosh. That's so cool. That's so cool to hear. Like, that's really humbling that people go to these kinds of links to listen in on this. Mo, wow, really? Watching from Egypt. That's cool. That's really cool. Great question. Gritty Pretty asks, why and how are narcissists so magnetic? I'm shocked by how much color he gives my life, and then the silent treatments are painful. Why is it so hard to give ourselves that vibrant color? Love the question, and I love how you worded that question. You are a very talented writer. So here's my take on it. And somebody had posted something similar in the support group the other day that I'm glad you brought this up, because I think it's definitely worth touching on. Oftentimes, narcissists are very charismatic, and they are kind of this whirlwind, and we very quickly tend to get kind of sucked into all of their charisma, and we want to spend hours upon hours every day with them, and so when they're gone, either through silent treatment or the discard, or we break up with them or what have you, we tend to feel like this incredible void in our life. And it's not so much that they're so amazing. What it really is that, and this is going to sound maybe harsh, and I definitely don't mean it to be, that we often don't have enough going on in our own life. And to me, I think it's just a sign. I would take it as a sign of, to really add some more dimension to your life. Do you have friends? Do you have hobbies? Because I'll tell you what a lot of people do, myself included, and this is something that I still struggle with, is making sure that you have friends and that you keep up with your friendships. So many people, especially when they're involved with a narcissist, they really want to make that person, like, the narcissist wants all of our attention, but then we often are happy to give it to them because we're like, oh, they're so charismatic and they're so confident and they're so interesting, or kind of what have you. And the next thing we know, like our world is revolving around them, and we've let our hobbies go, we've let our friendships go. And so then when they're gone, we really feel that void. And so it's really important that we keep, these other dimensions of our life going. And then if they do leave, it's so much easier to have an attitude of abundance when we've got other things going on. It's so hard to leave anything, to leave a job, to leave a relationship that's not working for us, if we feel like that's the only thing we've really got going. So I hope that helps. And also too, along with that, if we can learn from that, if we can take realizing, okay, we feel like there's this big void in our life when they're not there, that's not healthy. And it's also a vulnerability. And until we can get that vulnerability, until we can meet those needs, until we can get that bucket filled, odds are we're going to continue finding ourselves in relationships with narcissists, because it's this vulnerability that we're not aware of that we have. So, and again, I have fallen into this many, many times. I mean, everything I talk about on this show has been lessons I've learned too, the hard way. So if you can realize that love bombing and that whirlwind situation and talking to people that you really don't know for hours upon hours every single day is that's not healthy. Even though it can feel like intoxicating, it can feel ideal, it can feel really healthy, it's not. So it's so important that we kind of slow things down and take things at a speed that is not only comfortable for us, but that we know deep down is healthy. So, we were talking in the support group the other day about online dating and how, a lot of people tend to, this amazing new partner comes along and they're texting for hours upon hours every day. And, this has been going on for several weeks now, and they're developing feelings for this person. All of that it's a problem. And if you haven't been on online dating recently, a lot has changed in the past, even 5 years, but for sure, like 10 or more years. Before with dating, at least from a woman's perspective, or maybe just my perspective, I wasn't comfortable meeting strangers off of the internet. So I really thought, okay, I really want to establish this deep connection before I meet somebody in person. And the problem with that nowadays is there's a lot of people online. This was not the case 10 years ago. The vast majority of people that are online dating, or maybe not the vast majority, but a lot, I would say 40 to 50% are either married, they're scammers, they're not who they claim to be. Either it's an old picture, they're bored, they just want attention, what have you. And so it's not valuing your time if you're allowing a total stranger to suck up hours upon hours every day, and you're talking and you're texting and what have you. It's really important to text a few texts to see if there's enough chemistry there that you would actually want to talk to them over the phone, and then talk to them over the phone, 1 or 2 conversations max, and not like super long conversations, just enough to know, is there enough chemistry for me to meet this person for coffee? And then at that stage, then you meet for coffee. That's it. No dinner, no movie, no like extended period. Because and here's why, because if you commit to something like that ahead of time and then you get there, you're going to know within like the first 5 or 10 minutes if there's that chemistry there, or if they're a total creeper. So it values your time and it values their time. And plus there's kind of this sense of, so here's my thing. If I meet somebody through like online dating, or at least before, I mean, I'm dating somebody now, but like before, I would meet for coffee and I would buy my own coffee. I'd get there 5-10 minutes early, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, buy my own coffee, settle in. And then that way there was no kind of pressure. There was no kind of unspoken pressure or sense of obligation for me to stay for any length of time, thinking like, oh, well, he bought me a cup of coffee. Like, I guess I kind of, I'll let him set the pace now of how long he wants to talk now. And then plus, if I'm not interested, I feel bad having a guy buy me a drink. And then, right away, like I'm not interested. So I think it's so much better for people just to buy your own cup of coffee, meet in a public place, not in a park, not in a parking lot, not at their house, not at your house, a public place for a drink. And that's it. So, that was kind of a tangent, but those are the biggest things is it's so much easier to avoid these situations ahead of time than it is to try to emotionally get untangled down the road. And some of the biggest ways we get tangled up with these people, it's the love bombing. That's probably the number one thing, is that so many of us are misreading that love bombing as sincerity and as something healthy or ideal. And it's not. It's a big problem. It's a problem if you find yourself really like emotionally invested in a total stranger that you've only talked to a few times and that you've never met. That's a big sign that you need to get some more stuff going on in your life, because it's really hard if you don't have a lot going on in your life. If all you do is, take care of your kids and you go to work and you don't really have much of a social life, you don't have hobbies, it's really hard to let go of something that's toxic when it's kind of the only thing that's, I don't want to like bringing you some excitement, not saying that your kids or your job aren't exciting, but that's kind of out of breaking up the routine, I guess, if that makes sense. Oh, interesting. Narc Free says, if anybody is ever saying the series The Tudors is amazing, it's amazing how narcissistic the king, Henry VIII, is. Every single tactic he does throughout the movie is pretty amazing. It's pretty textbook. Yeah. World leaders in general, Henry VIII is a good one. Napoleon is a good one. I think any type of real extreme, dictator type personality, it's interesting to look at, kind of knowing what we know now. Another character from history that you might really find interesting if you're into all of that is the guy Rasputin. I believe that's how you say his name. Fascinating. He was a really, really wicked, sinister dude, and how he was able to kind of wrap his tentacles around this royal family. And it was, I don't know, history is so interesting. Another show, kind of speaking of TV shows, that's interesting is the other night I was watching South Park and the newest season. And so if you're familiar with the character of Cartman, here is this, kind of on a good day, Cartman is very, very much a narcissist. On a bad day, he's a total psychopath, right? The two most recent episodes of it are him and his girlfriend that are in this relationship, and he is psychologically and emotionally abusive. It was really interesting watching this and seeing just how well the show captured what it's like to be with a psychologically manipulative and abusive person. So, if you're a fan of South Park, if you're not a fan, if you've never seen the show before, I don't know how you'd feel about it, but that was pretty interesting. Interesting. Harmony says, hi, Dana. This is my first live stream. I have a hard time reading love bombing when it comes to friends. All of my quote unquote best friends have been covert narcissists. Yes. So great point. Love bombing can come across in a wide variety of ways from a wide variety of people. And so it can be easier, instead of us trying to figure out what, is this really love? I've been there too. I see this in the support group. People were like, well, okay, this person, they want to text me 4 or 5 times a day, but it's not so flowery and so over the top. And basically what they're saying is they're not experiencing. Actually, what they're saying is, I'm experiencing something problematic, but it doesn't look like the problem I had before. So is this still a problem? Is basically what they're saying. And the answer is yes. So it's one of those things, kind of like seeing the forest through the trees. Love bombing comes across in a wide variety of ways. It can come across from coworkers or, your boss, or your professor, or other students in school, or friends, or family, or is most commonly done with like online dating. It's something that cults do lots. So it can come across in a wide variety of ways. I think the big takeaway from that isn't so much to try to figure out, is this kind of, instead of looking for that line in the sand of, well, what is normal love bombing and what is problematic love bombing, realizing kind of it's all problematic, and that you set the pace. So to slow things down to where a pace that you're comfortable moving at. If you're feeling like there's this attitude of scarcity, sort of like on infomercials, when they're like, like, act now, this offer is only good for the next 3 days. And you're like, well, I don't know. And then they keep kind of upping the ante, right? They're like, but wait, there's more. If you buy one, you get one free. And it starts becoming this feeling of, how can I possibly say no to this? And you find yourself kind of getting pulled in. If you're feeling like you either need to jump at a chance of this relationship working, or you're going to lose something amazing, there's nothing there. Like a normal, healthy relationship and a normal, healthy person, they don't act like that and they don't feel like that. So if something's real, it'll still be there in a month or 2 or a year. Like there is no need to, like, hurry up and act now, especially if your gut instinct is telling you this is the problem. And I get how that can be so difficult to sort out, especially when you've gone through narcissistic abuse before. And you're like, I don't know if it's just my PTSD talking, or if I'm really sensing that something's off. Like, really, like 9.5 times out of 10, it's something's really off. So just err on the side of caution and take things at a pace that you're comfortable with. So as far as telling with friends, it's the same. It's that same vulnerability that we tend to have. If we don't have a lot of other things going on in our life, if we're new to town, or if it's a new job, or we're feeling kind of fearful, or feeling insecure or unloved or unimportant, all of these things are vulnerabilities. And if somebody's very quick to attach themselves to you and want to spend all their time, and then they want to start talking and texting all the time, and these kinds of things, and you're finding yourself getting caught up in a whirlwind, whirlwinds are always a problem. They're always a problem. And the vast majority of a time, they lead to tornadoes. So just move slow. There's so much more benefit in moving slow than moving super fast, especially when it comes to relationships and friendships. And then paying attention, because that's setting a boundary. So if you're like, I'm busy, because you have a lot, you've got things going on, you've got a life, and you're like, okay, well, I would love to see you tomorrow, but I've got, this Wednesday nights, I play cards with my friends. Thursday night, I have Tai Chi. Saturday night or Saturday afternoon, I go to the farmer's market. Like, you've got things going on in your life. You're going to be setting a boundary with that person and saying, like, I can't start spending every waking moment with you. They're either going to respect that or they're not. And if they're pushing you to cancel your plans and hang out with them, and they're not, and they just kind of keep at it, then that shows you a lot right there. Like, how are people when you set boundaries with them? Yes, I agree. Maria, you're so right on. She says, if you fear losing someone, the problem lies within us. I used to feel that, but that is giving someone else way too much power over my own happiness. Yes. And this is another thing that I hear in the support group. I've been there too. It's this feeling of they made me so happy. And yeah, I don't miss the abuse, but I miss that happiness and realizing that other people, it's something's very out of alignment if we're looking towards other people to make us feel a certain way. It's the kind of that old cliche of happiness comes from within. It's very, very true. And that goes back to having a life that you love. Because when you have a life that you love, you feel complete. Like you're not looking around being like, okay, I just need this one more thing and then I will be complete. Then relationships and friendships and all these other things, they're candles on the cake. They're not the whole cake. So, building up that happiness in having hobbies and things that are nourishing to you is such an important part. It's so much better before you start dating to have that in place, because it's really hard to see a situation clearly and as the problem that it is if you don't have those things in place. Yeah. Maria says, yes, moving slow allowed me to keep my balance, to not get swept up and to not get emotionally attached right away. Moving slow is such an important step not to override. I agree completely. Completely. Bonnie says, in the middle of taking care of an 88-year-old disabled mother that needs a hip replacement, I'm married to a narcissist for over 30 years. I don't know how to start unraveling finances at this point. I think a good step would be to see if you can set up like a free consultation with an attorney, like one of those initial appointments that's like 30 minutes long, or even if you have to pay for it, and see what can you start doing. Um, Setting up kind of because then there's my answer, then there's going to be like what's legal in your area, the answer, right? So they're two different things. But if it was me, I would see about getting a separate bank account and putting some money aside that that they don't know about. But really, I would contact an attorney and see kind of what they would say for your area. Oh, George says, Dana, why do you feel narcissists lock themselves onto one person, even though they could potentially manipulate a variety of people? I need to sleep soon. I love your live streams. Thank you for everything. Okay, George, we'll get you so you can go to bed. I think they don't lock themselves onto one person. It feels like it from our perspective because we're the target, but they spend a lot of time and energy until they can kind of like secure the target. And then once they've got that one target on lockdown, they're most of the time they're back out there and they're securing more and more targets. So they tend to have this kind of pipeline of people. And I don't know. To me, it seems I'm always like impressed with the amount of energy that they have. To me, it's exhausting, even thinking about it. But for them, that's their fuel, that they need that. So they have this steady stream, this pipeline of people all the time. So, yep. Bonnie says they do manipulate. Narcissists have many people in their harem, including flying monkeys. Yes. Yes, they do. Yep. Maria says, yes, that's the magic. We feel so special, but they have a pipeline of people. And Standing Firm says, yeah, that's exactly what I've noticed. I'm glad it's not me. Yep. Yes, I agree, Walter. Great point. He says, I feel the true work is inside of us. The narcissist is just there, but the work, the growth, the maturity is in us for us to do. Yes. And I will tell you that your realization took me probably, I'm going to say 7 years after after my relationship with Jack to realize that I did not see my part in things or the work that I needed to do for a very long time. And it wasn't until, and here's what's so weird to me is I wanted to, like, I really, really wanted to figure out what happened. But I really thought that, and I think a lot of people fall into this where they're like, it feels like a hit and run accident. Like I got tangled up with this person. It was a fluke. It wasn't my fault. I did nothing. And so, which is all very true, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of lessons we can squeeze out from this. And so for me, it was when I got into that second relationship and then it ended, it was again, like this Lifetime TV movie. That was my wake up call. And I realized, okay, I thought it was a fluke. Now it's a pattern. So what am I missing? What am I missing? And how can I prevent this from happening again? And that's what started my search into all of this, because I didn't identify at the time with having any codependency issues. I didn't see what was going on. And now I realize I had these vulnerabilities. I'd had these vulnerabilities for a very long time. Like the person was talking about before with having friends that were very manipulative and problematic, that was me too. And so I had some of those friendships in my life before, but and I guess here's why I didn't connect that earlier, is because while I had some problematic relationships, I also had a lot of really amazing ones. So it wasn't so obvious, I guess. Like I didn't see a clear pattern for a very long time. So yes. So once we can realize here's the thing, everybody has vulnerabilities. It's a part of being human. So it's not a matter of if you have vulnerabilities, it's a matter of what are your vulnerabilities. And we're all going to have different vulnerabilities at different stages in our life. So some people might have vulnerabilities stemming back from childhood. They grew up, abused, or they grew up neglected, or they grew up with parents that just didn't know how to show love for whatever reason. And they carried those vulnerabilities forward into their adult life, and that's a vulnerability, but they just never realized it. And because most of us don't. It's sort of like the saying goes, the last thing the fish notices is the water. How we are is how we are. And even though we're around other people, it doesn't often register that something's a problem in our own life. So, but then some people too grow up in a really idealistic childhood. They have this Norman Rockwell childhood. And then later on down the road, they get tangled up with an emotional manipulator, and then they don't know why. And it could be that they were never really taught about boundaries. I mean, how many of us are, right? Or that, maybe they moved to a new town and they were lonely. I mean, it's so important that we realize these things. Like it's not always based in these vulnerabilities are not always based on our childhood. Like sometimes childhood could be totally fantastic, but then later on in life, a person could be married, have this amazing marriage for 40 years and their spouse dies. And then all of a sudden, next thing they know, they get tangled up with an online dating scammer and they lose their life savings. So it's important for us to examine what are our vulnerabilities, to work towards fixing those vulnerabilities. And then I think really so much of it, it's self-awareness, it's tuning inward. And I think this is a challenge for men, especially. It's a challenge for men and women, but I think more so for men, because men are so conditioned at a young age to toughen up. Boys don't cry, you toughen up. And this is the idea of kind of what a man is supposed to be. And so I think a lot of boys at a fairly young age, they learn to kind of turn off their emotions. But what's happening with that is they're also turning off a lot of their instincts. This is something as a society we just don't teach. We do our children a huge disservice by not teaching them this stuff. So, and then later on in life as adults, like we're like, why is our life not working? And a lot of it just stems back from we weren't taught a lot of really fundamental things. So, turning inward, learning that your emotions are more than just feelings. They are like your internal guidance system. They're like a GPS. And so what does it mean? How do you feel when something's off? Or when you're tense, or when you're anxious, or when you're depressed? How does your body process that? Because we all process it in different ways. For example, when I'm depressed, I tend to sleep, or overwhelmed, I tend to sleep a lot. And I tend to eat really like high fat, high carb, high sugar food. That's a sign for me. So if I start gaining weight, or if I'm sleeping 12 hours a day and I wake up and I'm still tired, that's a sign that there's something out of alignment in my life. I hold tension in my shoulders. That's a sign. If I find myself like, doing that, that's a sign that something's out of alignment. Everybody responds to stuff in a different way. There's the whole kind of fight, flight, freeze. I would say, well, then there's the friend, fight, flight, freeze, friend. And then I'm going to say friend and forage are the other ones. So foraging, like becoming a pack rat, hoarding kind of stuff, doing things excessively, kind of building up this wall around you. That's a sign. The fight mode, becoming really aggressive, really irritable, really defensive. You're rehashing things in your mind. The flight mode, you're escaping, you're drinking too much, you're sleeping too much, you're shopping too much. Friend, the friend mode is we're scared, so we start reaching out. And oftentimes this is why we fall for that love bombing. We're reaching out, we need a friend. But oftentimes when we're in that panic mode, when we're reaching out to people, we're needing a friend, that's like chumming the waters for sharks, because all of those problematic people can smell that vulnerability a mile away. So I think knowing that is huge. And so once you can kind of identify, how do I process emotions? How have I been processing emotions? And then your life can really start to change, because then you can really start doing the work that's necessary to because really it's just about getting more into alignment with yourself. And the cool thing is you don't have to like make, massive major changes. You don't have to have it all figured out. Like if you can just make a few changes periodically, it's sort of like this setting this trajectory. If you change the degree of the line by a few degrees, like 6 months or a year out, you're going to be in a very different place. So it doesn't take massive change. It just takes a few small changes to make a big difference. Yeah, Bonnie says, yikes, chumming the water for sharks. I never thought of it that way. It's so true, though. It really is. And, one of the biggest things, especially with online, is I think one of the biggest tells is if a person is very quick to make a total stranger their whole world. If you're very quick, if they're messaging you with something. So this is a topic for me that I'd find interesting, because of course it's so much easier to see stuff in other people than it is in ourselves, but to watch other people and how they're processing the things, especially what I would consider to be like slam dunk problematic things. And these kind of like quote unquote processing errors, a lot of it's those vulnerabilities that aren't being met. If they had those vulnerabilities met, I think a lot of them would see it as the problem that it really is. So you know, it's valuing your time, and it's valuing your energy, and it's valuing your emotions. People need to work to get into your inner circle, and that needs to happen over time. That should be a very sacred space for you. Your inner circle is a sacred space. And for us to not just kind of give out tickets to, we're not letting just everybody in, right, to our inner circle. And just because a person is a parent or a sibling or family or kind of, a coworker or whatever, or even if you just spend a lot of time with them, doesn't mean that they're automatically in your inner circle. Like, your inner circle is people that you feel safe around, that you feel, that you trust, that have proven they've earned that trust. So it can be kind of discouraging at first. Sort of like the saying goes, the truth will really upset you, but then it'll set you free. And it's so true. So if you can think about, like, okay, yeah, you're probably going to have to nurse some hurt feelings when you realize this person that you thought was your best friend, or that you thought was your boyfriend or your husband or your wife or whoever, a person that should be in your inner circle isn't. But once you realize that, then there is this freedom, because you're like, oh, I'm aware. I'm aware of what's really going on now. And this person, maybe they're still a great person in a lot of ways, but they're not your inner circle. They're not who you would call in an emergency or that you can rely on, right? So maybe they kind of go back. If you think about, if you drop a pebble in a lake, right, and there's kind of this ring effect, your life is very much like that. So like, you have your inner circle, but then you have kind of these outer rings. And so it's not such like a line in the sand kind of thing. It's a ring in a pond is what it is. So who's kind of on the next tier, and then the next tier, and thinking about it that way. Because so many of us are so quick to, and I think a lot of this too has to do with kind of the language that we use, but we're so quick to think, okay, this person is really friendly, or I really enjoy their company, right? They're really funny. They're really easy to be around, what have you. And we think, okay, this person's a friend, but they're not. They might not be. If they've stolen money from you, if they're not reliable, if they're, if they're abusive in any way, like, then they're not a friend. And so then they kind of need to either be totally out of your pond, or they need to definitely be backed up a few rings. So it's, like I said, hard realization, but once you realize it, it's huge. Yeah, Kevin says, yeah, I know the feeling. I experience chronic fatigue. I do think it's due to all of the gaslighting and forcing me into the freeze response. I feel like the solution is to break out of the freeze response through breathing, cold showers, stretching, exercise, etc. Yeah, so those can definitely be great. Another thing I think that can help break out of that freeze response is it's to get that anxiety down. So especially when you're talking about that it's such a primal thing, that fight or flight response, to get yourself to a place where you're calm, to where you can take action. So a trick that works for me is, if I have something to do that I find there's a lot of resistance in me doing it, is to set a timer for a very small chunk of time, 10 minutes. And all I have to do is work up the energy to do this thing, whatever it might be, for 10 minutes. I don't have to do it all. I don't have to do it for an hour. I just have to do it for 10 minutes. And if that feels too overwhelming, keep backing it up. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 1 minute, maybe 30 seconds. It might seem very silly, but it really will help you to get out of that overwhelm. There's a concept that you might have heard of that's exactly this, like what I'm talking about. And it's called Kaizen. And it's the art of basically constant and never ending improvement. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but I think it's such an interesting concept. It can really be life changing. It was a concept that was developed it was during a war, World War I, maybe. And I'm gonna go with World War I. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it was developed over here in the United States. And it was sort of like America was losing the war and they needed to make some very massive changes very quickly. They didn't have time to make major changes. And so what they were doing is they were trying to build like airplanes and tankers and these kinds of things. It might have been World War II. Anyways, they had this realization of, okay, we need to start making all of these small changes like today. So everybody think about what kind of small changes do we need to make? And, the janitor, like, what can we do to improve efficiency and effectiveness? And the janitor might have said, hey, you know what? I noticed that you guys throw a lot of this one type of thing away. Or, the other guy is like, man, I really can't stand here, work on this assembly line. It's killing my feet. And so they were brainstorming all these things. And so they were making all of these small changes, which radically improved their improvement, and it helped them to actually win the war. So Japan actually is the one that ran with this concept. And this is something that Japanese businessmen use on a regular basis. And so it's sort of like how they gauge success is, how is your Kaizen? How are those small improvements doing? Because that's where the magic happens. It's in those small improvements. So very, very powerful concept. It's Kaizen if you want to look more into it. And so the concept, they were saying, if you're going to start doing it in your own life, like let's say, for example, you wanted to start developing the habit of flossing your teeth. Instead of being like, okay, I'm going to floss all my teeth, that you would start off when you would floss just one tooth. It's easy. Anybody, no matter how unmotivated you are, you can still do one tooth. And then the next day you would do 2 teeth. And then the next day you would do 3 teeth. And so the practices that you're building up, you're getting used to actually taking time to floss, and you're getting rid of that fear, that resistance to doing something new. And so then over time, you would be flossing all of your teeth and it's no big deal. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Katrina says, Dana, I'm going to go floss right now. Thanks for the reminder. Oh, Sunny, that's such a great question. Says, every narc in my life accuses me of running away from relationships. Am I running or saving myself from their abuse? You're saving yourself from their abuse. That's such a common line of, it's manipulative is what it is. Oh, you're running away from relationships, or how could you not give us another chance? Or commitment is forever. And I can't believe this doesn't mean more to you. How can you give up on us now? But the reality is, I'm not giving up on you. I'm not running away. I'm keeping myself safe because you've shown me that you're hurtful and that you continue to be hurtful. So, and it can be difficult to disengage and not get roped into having that conversation and not get roped into trying to defend yourself and in your behavior. Like those are times where you just are like, you know what? There's no anything past this point is now a waste of time, because either they don't see it or they do see it, but they want to rope you in so they can drag you into this argument and try to wrestle you down. And if a person's abusive, you don't need it. You don't need it in your life, and you don't need to justify why you're staying away from them. So they'll do that. I'm trying to think of some of the lines I've heard. This one guy that I called it off with, this was a few years ago, had told me, because I was like, I just got that dark vibe from him. And I found myself asking, like, anybody that would listen, what do you think of this? Is it him or is it me? Or is it him or is it me? Is it him or is it me? And I was rehashing and I was trying to pull apart everything. And I didn't even know what I was looking for. I guess I was looking for clarity, but I had all the clarity I needed. He hadn't done anything that was like concrete enough for me to feel like it was okay for me to walk away. But I couldn't shake that dark vibe that I was getting. And frankly, that's enough of a reason to walk away. Like, you don't need to stick around and wait for a person to prove you right. It goes back to that abundance mentality of like, there's lots of people out there that don't have a lot of dark energy. So if, this, like, it's okay to walk away from that. But, I had called things off, and he had emailed me and said, I can understand, given your past, why you would have all these hesitations about relationships and men and all of this. But I want you to rest assured, I'm not a problematic person. Like, I'm a really good guy with good intentions and blah, blah, blah. And no, it didn't even matter what he said, because I knew how I felt. And I don't feel that way around normal people with good intentions. So, but that's all part of them telling you everything that you want to hear. Another thing, kind of back to the online dating, somebody had said this in the support group the other day. We were talking about, okay, with online dating, generally within that first month, then they're going to start asking, like, scammers will start asking for money. And then, 100% of the time, if somebody's asking you for money online that you don't know, it's a scam. And so one gal had said that the person in her life, the narcissist in her life, was doing the exact opposite. Very forthcoming, let me loan you money, wanting to give her money. It was kind of creating the sense of like, we're a team. I can help you. I want to be here for you. You can trust me. And then, 6 months later, the tables had really dramatically turned, and, he was living off of her. And, so that initial loan of like, whatever, $100 ended up costing her a lot. So you just gotta be on the lookout for problematic behavior, but more importantly, think how you feel. If it feels off, it's off. Yeah. Maria says, they loved it when I gave them all my time, but the minute I, God forbid, wanted something from them, I had too much time on my hands. And granted, they were right. So I stopped giving them my time, period. Yes. So time is a big one, especially, it's like what I was saying earlier with friendships, and making sure that we have those, that we live a multi-dimensional life. We've got friends and the things going on and hobbies, and we are our own person outside of a relationship. I think so many of us tend to use our friendships as like placeholders for a relationship until we realize that we're doing that. And then it's like anything else. Like, once we realize, oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing that, then we can start doing something differently. And I have a lot of friends who also struggle with kind of this being very out of alignment, being this kind of over giver, a lot of, I would say, pretty major codependency issues. And this has been an aha moment for all of us of, you know what, you guys, I really enjoy them. I think they're fantastic human beings, but I've known some of them for 10 or more years, but we have all run this pattern of, when we start dating, then those friendships go on the back burner until our relationship comes crashing down. And then we reach out to them and need a friend. But the reality is, we haven't been a friend the whole time we were in this relationship. And that was a very hard truth for me to realize, that I wasn't emotionally available. I didn't know what it was to be a good friend. And so that's been a whole big, learning curve too. It's just one of those things. Like once we know better, we can do better. And it's cool because we were talking about this realization. And since we've all had it, we've all been making so much more of a concerted effort to keep those friendships going, like let's go for a walk or let's go out for lunch or, hey, how are you doing? And making sure that our life still has dimension and that it's enjoyable outside of whatever relationship we're in. Bonnie says, yes, overgiver. That is a great way to put it. So true. Yeah, I think, that word codependency, it's such a kind of a nebulous word, fuzzy word, and it's a confusing word. And it's also one of those words that can feel very re-victimizing to people, especially if they're feeling like I was in a hit and run accident. I did nothing wrong except try to love this person. But thinking about it in terms of overgiving, chances, if we're giving people second and 20-second chances, if we're sticking around and they're lying and they're cheating and they're stealing and they're abusing and they're yelling and screaming and belittling and we're feeling ground down and we're basically being dragged through hell, that's a problem. Like we're overgiving, we're out of alignment with that. No healthy relationship should feel like you're being dragged through hell. Like love doesn't hurt. It really, really doesn't. Loving somebody who drags you through hell hurts, but that's not healthy. And again, this stuff isn't taught. So many of us are walking around with kind of this faulty programming that we picked up from our friends or our family or our religion or our culture or what have you about what a relationship is or what a friendship is or even what a job is, like what our role in a job is. And if our personality is kind of that natural bend where we give, then we probably have a pattern of these kind of one-sided dynamics in our life where if you're feeling resentful, I think that's probably the biggest sign. If you're feeling continually resentful or angry, those are two really great signs that your boundaries have been violated. But the reality is nobody else knows where your boundaries are. Everybody has different boundaries. So it's up to us to let other people know where they are. And this is the thing, this is the challenge of the overgiver is, we tend to think that other people are like us and that they have good intentions and that they're kind and considerate and compassionate to the same level we are. And so a lot of this problematic behavior, if somebody does all of a sudden kind of attach themselves to us or they want to spend a lot of time with us, we feel bad saying no, we feel uncomfortable kind of setting limits. We give and we give and we give and we give until we get burned. And then we get angry or resentful. But if we can back up a little bit and see that pattern of, oh my goodness, I was letting this other person totally dictate the speed everything was going. They'd been making me uncomfortable for a while. I didn't know how to handle it. So I just avoided the situation or I smiled and nodded. Like if you just didn't know how to handle it, then it's so important that overgivers learn to set boundaries because overtakers won't. Like that's what they do. They push and they push and they push until we break and until we snap. And then when we do snap, oftentimes they're shocked because then they're like, wow, you're, like you're such a witch. I can't believe like you yelled at me, or I can't believe that you said no, you're so mean. What happened? You've changed. And because they've been so used to getting their way for so long. And so even setting boundaries, I mean, any new skill takes practice, but like setting boundaries really takes practice because people, if they're not used to doing it, that's what happens. They tend to overgive. That resentment builds and builds and builds. They might not even be aware that they're feeling resentment because they probably felt like that their whole life. And so then they get to the point where they just snap, and then they snap back. And then they go into kind of this fortressing mode. That would be another, I would say, defense mechanism. So add that to the list. But they kind of go into this fortressing mode where they don't just build boundaries, they build walls. And they don't know how to, they jump from being assertive to being aggressive. And it, the reality, it takes a while to kind of get your sea legs with boundaries and how to set them. It takes practice. It just takes practice. So if you're feeling like you're fortressing right now, or you're isolating, or you're being aggressive, that is oftentimes a step. It's a step in the right direction, but it's kind of an overstep in learning all of this. Sort of like Goldilocks and the porridge. This bowl is too hot, this bowl is too cold, this bowl is just right. Like, we tend to have to kind of swing both ways before we kind of land somewhere in the middle. Oh, I like that. Hold on. Somebody just had a really great quote. I hope I can find it again. Yes. That's so true, Maria. I can't, oh gosh, I'll keep scrolling for that other comment. That was such a good one. Maria says, I love the word codependent. I always thought I was an angel, just giving love, but I was giving love to get my needs met. I gave with strings attached without totally realizing it. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And for me, I've been in pretty much helping professions my whole adult life. I mean, there's been brief periods of time where I would do something radically different because I would burn out, but I'd always came back to teaching or nursing. Those were my two things. And, and then as an advocate, and then now this. And it's been very interesting trying to find that line and to make sure that my intentions and my actions are healthy in all of this, because they weren't for a very long time. And again, I didn't realize it. Like it's like an awareness. It's an awareness that I think just keeps going. Like, I don't know if it ever ends, which might sound really overwhelming, but I think it's kind of exciting because it's just figuring life out. It's cool. But, yeah, my thing is, I didn't realize that I was giving love to get my needs met either. And I think for me, what it was is I was really over identifying with the people that I was helping, even though I've worked with like a wide range of people, Alzheimer's patients to autistic children to, domestic violence survivors to, kids from juvenile hall. I mean, just the wide range. And I didn't even realize that I was over identifying with them. But hindsight being what it is, I think what it was I saw their hurt. I saw their hurt or their fear. And I really over empathized with that. And so that was one of the reasons I would burn out so much, is because I cared so much that in many ways it was smothering to them, and it was cheating them out of the opportunity of learning, of being empowered. That's what it was. It's making the shift from helping other people to empowering other people, and realizing, like, I don't want to cheat them out of the opportunity to learn and grow. Like, I can be here and discuss all these things. I mean, I love doing this stuff, sharing aha moments and having all of this. But at the end of the day, they have to do the work. And it's so cool to see people start having these aha moments and applying it in their own life. It's just, man, I tell you, when things start getting in alignment, like, everything changes, because then I'm not feeling responsible, and they also get all the credit. And that's really cool. It's really cool to see people's self-esteem improve when they realize, yeah, they actually can move forward and they can achieve their goals and they can kind of, do whatever skills that, would make them more empowered to do. But yeah, it's such a process with getting this stuff in alignment. Walter says, Dana, would you please talk more about the job aspect? Well, I think a lot of us a lot of overgivers. This is like, we are really good at this. And so a lot of us seek out professions where we are professional caregivers. And we're nurses, we're teachers, we're social workers, we're therapists, we're, um, kind of in the helping profession a lot of the time. And because I think many of us have learned at a very young age that to be responsible. We were kind of, a lot of us, I think, were like the adult child. And we really learned to be a caregiver. And a lot of us consider ourselves, like, if you've heard the word empaths, and where we're like, man, I, can walk into a room and I can really hone in on what's going on with different people. And, for me, I didn't hear the word empath until probably a few years ago. But when I did hear it and I began researching it, I'm like, oh man, that's me to a T. But then what I thought was so weird with that is like, okay, well, empaths are really, empathic. They have a lot of empathy and they can really sense the emotions of other people and in the room. For me, in my experience, I grew up with when I was a teenager, my grandmother who had dementia came to live with us. And so I learned at a fairly young age to be able to read a lot of like nonverbal cues. And I think that's what really helped for me to be good at being a caregiver. So I worked with people that had brain injuries or that had, that were nonverbal or, that were profoundly mentally retarded or these kinds of things. And so those, like, you really learn how to read a room and to be able to respond to people's needs effectively without them having to say a word. And it was a friend of mine that pointed it out to me later on, like 6 years ago, who said, it's so weird that you keep getting tangled up with emotional manipulators when you're so good at reading people. And that's when I realized that what it was is I was so good at reading other people's pain. And I wasn't good at all with my own emotions. And so I think, paying attention to so the point being, in your profession, do you have that? Are you over empathizing with other people? Are you able to really be in tune with other people's emotions and other people's pain and their needs and wants? And do you have that same thing for yourself? Because a lot of us don't. But I will tell you, a person that has those skills, that empathic nature, coupled with solid boundaries, man, like, talk about game changer. It's phenomenal. And I feel like I'm only kind of scratching the surface of this in my own life, but it's amazing. It's amazing. I feel like I'm so much more perceptive than the average person. And even more so than my old self from like a year ago. I feel like I can really, really read a situation and I can double check it with myself. It's awesome. So, okay. So back to the job situation. Yes, paying attention to, like, are we putting up with are we giving second and 22nd chances at work? Are we staying in a job because we're good at it or because it's actually somewhat fulfilling for us? Are we the person that everybody tends to come talk to and dump all their stuff on? Is there still that one-sided dynamic going on at work? Because for a lot of us, it's like anything else. Like how we do something is how we tend to do everything. So if we have this one-sided dynamic with relationships where we give and give and give, and the other person takes and takes and takes, odds are we have a lot of that same stuff in our friendships and our work relationships and within our family. So it's really good to examine all of those different spheres, those rings of your life, and see, okay, what else is there? How else is this pattern showing up in my life? Let's see. Yes, Elise says, I was more the type of person who tried to teach the narcissist how to behave when they don't show how to behave when they don't show empathy. But the abuse escalated until I couldn't take it anymore. Yes. So many of us do this. We just think, man, I'm normally so good at getting through to other people, especially if we are a teacher, or if we've ever been a teacher, or if we've always kind of had that kind of parental role with other people, right? Or that kind of teacher role where we think, I just need to get through to them. That's the problem. And if I can just get through to them, then they'll change. But I just need to figure out the wording or the time or somehow to make them understand what they're doing is actually a problem. Because the piece, though, that we're missing is that not everybody is like us. And so once we realize, if you're having to explain kind of the basics of adult behavior to another adult, there's a problem. And generally the problem is you're being manipulated. It's not their behavior. They know what flirting looks like. They know what yelling sounds like. They know they wouldn't do this stuff at work, right? They wouldn't do it. I think that's probably the best example. They wouldn't do it in an environment where there were actual consequences. They generally wouldn't do it in front of a judge or in front of a police officer. They do it because they know they can get away with it. So don't fall into thinking, oh, they just don't know better. Like, they do. They do. These are a lot of just boundary pushes, and, it's how they kind of rope people in to trying to take care of them, and us thinking, and it's feeding that need within us of thinking, okay, they need me. I can't leave them. They need me. Who else is going to put up with all of this? Who else is going to teach them how to be able to give and receive love? Like I must, sacrifice myself in order for them to be okay. And that's very out of alignment thinking. That's big time overgiver thinking. You should never have to sacrifice yourself to save somebody else. Like that's a problem. Yeah. Alex says, if you give an abuser a foot, they will take a mile. Yes. Yes, I agree completely, Tammy. She says, I had this mistaken idea that once you entered into a committed relationship, that you did everything in your power to maintain it. That kept me stuck. A relationship can't be maintained by one person. Yeah. See, again, like this is the stuff that these are the conversations that aren't being had that really should be had. Because, yeah, it's great. Commitment is fantastic if you're committed to another healthy person who wants a healthy relationship. Being committed to a terrorist or to an emotional terrorist is a problem. Like there is no value in being committed to an abusive person. Like that's going to just destroy you. So I think separating those two things out, because there's a huge difference between, commitment and codependency. There's a big difference between love bombing and love, or between being a friend and a person being friendly. And it's this blurring of the two concepts that keeps people so stuck, myself included. And a lot of people think, oh, well, here's another common thing that I see. Oh, well, I have to keep contact with this person because they're my mother, or my father, right? Their family. And it's like, well, okay, but they molested you and they've stolen money from you and they've done nothing but use, abuse, and exploit you. So to me, that's not family and that's not a parent. Like there's a difference between a person being a parent and being a predator. Predators have children too that they also prey on. So just because a person's a parent or a sibling doesn't mean that they automatically get that spot in your inner circle or that you need to keep contact with them. It's so important to not be like overly enchanted with DNA and instead look at their actions, you know? But yeah, there's a lot of this confusing programming that we all have. And kind of sorting out kind of this from that takes quite a bit of doing. And it's oftentimes, this is kind of, this might sound re-victimizing and I don't mean it to come across this way, but this is kind of the gift in these narcissistic relationships is they're often the fire that we can't ignore. But the reality is the smoke has been building in our lives for a very long time. We just didn't see it. We just kept getting more and more and more used to it. So this was the relationship that brought things to our attention. But like I was saying before, the mistake that I made that I want to warn you guys about so you don't make the same mistake is that it's not a fluke thing. That these relationships, if you find yourself in a relationship with a narcissist, there's always more to it. And it's such a big thing to turn inward and to examine what kind of faulty programming might I have? What kind of vulnerabilities might I have that were potentially exploited by this person? This can be, there's a saying that life is such a cruel teacher. She gives the test first and then the lesson later. And there's a lot of truth in that. And this can be such a painful, it can feel soul destroying. I mean, just emotionally devastating time. But please know that there's so much in here. It's like a crash course into emotional health. It's a crash course into self-awareness and emotional health that you never knew you needed, that can really yield so much benefit for you. It really, really can. There's so much that you can really squeeze out of this. I'm still, I mean, it's been years since my last relationship, my last narcissistic relationship, and I'm still squeezing out lessons from this. Like the personal growth that can come from this is just phenomenal. So I know it's painful now, but please know, like, just keep moving forward. There's a lot in this that you can get. So Missouri Cowboy, thank you for the live stream donation. He says, amen, Dana. Good deal. Yeah. It took me a long time to really realize that something good, something positive could come from something so incredibly negative. But there's a lot. There really is a lot. Bonnie says, I need boundaries 101. Oh, Bonnie, I would say start with paying attention to how you feel. That's the biggest. Oh boy. I want to probably like the biggest things I hope to kind of pass along is to pay attention to your emotions. They are your guide. They really, really are. And especially the negative ones. So if resentment, irritation, frustration, depression, anxiety, anger, rage, you're rehashing conversations over and over again, introspection. Is it me? Is it them? Is it me? Is it them? You're lost in this. You can't tell the difference between, is this a good situation or a bad situation? These are all of that is generally not generally, I would say it just is a sign that something's a problem. And for us to do kind of to think about what we need to do in order to get things back in alignment. And you will know if you've taken enough steps to get things back in alignment based on how you feel. When you start feeling kind of content, like just neutral, yeah, yeah, it's just kind of Wednesday afternoon, like you're just feeling emotionally neutral. You're feeling content. You're feeling optimistic. You're feeling positive. You have a sense of peace. Um, those are all feelings of like, okay, we're doing good. Like things are good. So I would start there. And then, with being assertive, with setting boundaries, framing things based on how you feel. So using I statements, like, when you said that, when you teased me about my ears or my hair, when you said that you didn't like my hair, that really hurt my feelings. And so you're taking ownership of it, right? So like, this really hurt my feelings. I had hurt feelings. You're letting a person know versus blaming them. You're a bad person. Why would you do this to me? Instead of going on the attack, because then that just starts a fight. So if you can just own it and just say like, yeah, you know what, that really hurt my feelings. And I'm having a hard time with that. Can we talk about this? And if they're a normal, decent person, confrontation's always awkward. Like it's always uncomfortable. But if you're in a good relationship or a good friendship, those kinds of conversations, those honest conversations can make the relationship grow stronger. They don't threaten to end them. Yes, Little Miss says, we can't control or change the narcissist. We have to focus on ourselves. That is a codependent trait, to always focus on the other person. Yes, I agree completely. And I will say though, too, when a person first gets out of an abusive relationship, the vast majority of time, they don't realize that they were in an abusive relationship for a wide variety of reasons. But generally because what they experienced doesn't match up with what they thought abuse was. Or they've experienced something worse in the past. And so they think, well, if I can still tolerate it, then it's not a problem. So, and especially if they're going through like emotional or verbal or psychological abuse, they can't quite pinpoint. They know that there's a problem. They just don't know like kind of what the problem is. And so they're very confused. Confusion is also a big sign of an abusive relationship, because normal relationships don't have a lot of confusion attached, because confusion is a big sign of manipulation. So, so a person, when they get out of an abusive relationship, they often don't realize that they've been abused. They realize something's wrong. And then they might start kind of researching things and start coming across words like narcissist or sociopath or these kinds of things. Then they realize they get that validation of, yeah, something, this was outside the realm of a normal relationship. So that tends to, I think, kind of be one of the first aha moments of, yeah, this is not a normal, like bad relationship. Like this is way outside the realm of normal. And then they start digging more and more, because of course, right? Like you're like, what? I was married to a sociopath? Like what? And so people, they're digging and digging and digging. And then they're learning all these different terms, and they're coming across all these videos and these books. And then they start to divide the world into two people, and, kind of narcissists and sociopaths, and then people that are normal. And they become very fixated on like these wanting that line in the sand, really. And this is kind of like the second stage of awareness, of realizing that other people are not like you. So it's a very normal stage. And so people are it's a horrifying realization of, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that there were so many people out there with toxic behavior. And so that's where all of this like researching comes from, and all of this focus on trying to understand narcissism is because it's your brain. A lot of it's just your brain. It's like your brain being like, I need to figure this out so I can figure out how to keep you safe. Like that's what your brain is driving you to do. But if you can realize that it's, there isn't this line in the sand between like a narcissist and a normal person. It's on a spectrum, and there's lots of shades of gray. And really the big takeaway is other people are not like you. And it's so important for us to not project our morals and values onto other people just because it may look like on the surface that we have certain things in common. So for example, let's say you're Christian, right? If just because a person might go to church with you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the same morals and values that you do, even though they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Like, they could also, my goodness, priests were molesting children, right? So just because a person has a certain religious belief doesn't mean that they have the morals and values that go along with it. You would think those things would go hand in hand, but oftentimes they don't. It's the same thing, like, we might have this camaraderie with somebody and it's unfounded, but we don't realize that it's unfounded. For example, like I'm half Sicilian. So it might, I tend to really warm up to people that are also Sicilian or half Sicilian, sort of like, we have that in common. That's so cool. Or, people that, do YouTube videos or other things that I might have in common with them. But the reality is they're a total stranger. And my brain is thinking that just because we have certain things in common, that we also have other, like morals and values in common, but we don't, only time will tell. Right. So, it's important to just go slow when getting to know new people and realize that they're not like us. 10% of people out there are really, really problematic. The other 10% are really, really good people. And then 80% fall somewhere in the middle. And the only way to tell who's who is time. Like somebody had mentioned earlier in the chat, sort of like when you meet somebody new, you tend to be meeting, they had said in the chat, like you're meeting their representative. It's very true. Like you're meeting their highest and best self. It's like a job interview. The person, and we've all been there, right? Like you go on a job interview, who you are in a job interview and who you tend to be 3 months into that job are not the same person. They might not be radically different, but they're for sure not the same person. And because we're not trying to impress anybody, right? Like we're just becoming a little bit more comfortable. We might not dress as fancy. We might use different language, kind of what have you. So it just takes time to get to know the person. And that's kind of the thing, especially with dating, is it's so easy. It's so easy for us to start for our brain to start filling in the gaps of what we want a situation to be like. And that's really the case with dating. It's amazing how that happens. That's why it's so important, I think, to meet somebody like before you start feeling feelings for them. So you're not falling in love with this fantasy that your brain has created. Like you're falling in love with the person. Banaz says, I believe there's a reason for our soul to level up. And according to Melanie Tanya Evans and so many other healers, this is why. It's a soul contract. I agree. I agree completely. People talk about soulmates, that I really feel like, this person was my soulmate. And then they turn out to just be like their worst nightmare. What I have found in my life is that, okay, this is going to sound really hippie woo-woo, so just bear with me here. If you think about the purpose of life is to evolve. right? That's what speech, that's on a micro level, it's about growth. It's about growth for the individual. On a macro level, it's about evolution of the species. And I think when we're meeting people that we're feeling that deep soulmate connection, our soulmate isn't designed for us to feel complete. Like that's an individual thing. Like we need to be able to feel complete and whole as a whole person. When we have that soulmate connection, to me, what it really signals is that this person has a lot of lessons and that they're there in our life to get us to grow. So they're there for our soul to level up, for our growth. So I hope that's not too discouraging for a lot of people. And a lot of people have this fantasy of like, this intense soulmate, whirlwind kind of thing. But I really don't think that like sincere love works like that. I think it's the opposite. It's that love makes a person feel calm and safe and secure, and it's comfortable. It doesn't feel like a fantasy or that you're now somehow complete. Like it just feels good, Ooh, I like that, Maria. She says, I heard something I love. Don't focus on meeting your soulmate. Focus on meeting a great teammate, somebody you can grow with. Yes, I agree completely. I love that because that's like the number one thing. If a person is not team oriented, if it's all about them, that's impossible. Just that alone, like there's no relationship present with a person who lacks that ability to work as a team. It's a very lonely road when you're in a relationship with a narcissist or a sociopath who, is pretending to be your ideal partner, but then working against you when you're not looking. Yes. Truth Seeker says, I want a best friend who I'm attracted and partnered to. Yes. And I fully believe that that's available to people, but like that definition of friendship, if you look it up, the definition of friendship is it's a mutual, right? Team, mutual state of trust and support. So it goes both ways. Trust and support. It doesn't mention anything about a person being funny or witty or charming. It's a mutual state of trust and support. That definition was such a game changer for me. It just really clarified so much. And if you think about a relationship needs to have that solid foundation of a friendship, that's what it is. It's that there has to be that mutual state of trust and support between two people for anything else to be there. Because you can have that attraction or that passion or that intensity, but if there's no trust and support, it's just manipulation and you're being used, but if there's trust and support and there's no passion or attraction, then there's not really a relationship. It's more of a friendship, but so much of it's learning to turn inward and paying attention, just getting in tune with your emotions. Standing Firm says, thank you. I have no idea what it's supposed to be like. Oh, I don't think a lot of people do. I mean, if you look at movies or cartoons or TV shows, all you see is a bunch of garbage. They're promoting this idea of ideal love, that the whirlwind romance and the charm and the intensity, and people are sleeping together on the first date, or and then somehow miraculously these relationships all turn out to work. And the reality is that's not the reality. Like that's how those tornadoes kick up, and really can do a lot of damage to a person's life. Healthy relationships tend to be like slow and steady. They don't create that feeling of urgency or like anxious, nervous, unhinged feeling. And then here's the thing too, is the healthier you get and the more in tune you get with your emotions, that feeling of like that unhinged, anxious, intense, that intensity is no longer going to be attractive to you. Like you'll start seeing it as problematic as it really is. You're awake. Like you're awake to it and you're seeing things clearly for probably the first time ever. Kevin says, it seems like such a hookup culture where I live. Nobody wants to go slow. Yeah, I would agree. I think the world is really moving to a hookup culture, and it's scary and it's sad. It's a game changer. The internet and instant messenger and Snapchat and stuff like that is it just changes the dating game, because before, with like our grandparents, you knew who was like you dated who lived within walking distance. It was pretty much what it was. So like your dating pool was within like a 10-mile radius. And now with the internet, it's so interesting. Like people don't even hardly meet in real life anymore. Like they meet through different dating apps and all kinds of things. So the stakes are much higher. The game has really leveled up. And there's so many more scammers, and there's so many more, married people, and just garbage that's on online dating that we need to be aware of. And the biggest thing is going slow and valuing your emotions and your time enough to do so. Yeah, I agree. With Alex says, I want to see a Hollywood movie like The Notebook, except what actually happens if it was real life. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've known a few people that have been seemingly happily married for many, many years, especially when I worked in a nursing home. And it was just like, there was one couple in particular, he was such an amazing man. And he was it makes me want to cry thinking about it. He was such a good husband and just a good man. And his wife was such a sweetheart, and she had Alzheimer's, and they had their own room. And he was fine, but they had moved into this facility because he could no longer take care of her, but he wanted to be with her. And they'd been married for, I don't even know, 50 something years. And kind of seeing her like deteriorate into Alzheimer's, and just like how good he was to her. It was just, it is out there, and there are like a lot of really good people out there who, will treat you with dignity and respect and love. But the thing is though, we can't find those people if we've got the wrong people taking up the spots in our inner circle. We can't have both, so. Bonnie says, scammers and chumming. How is an older person supposed to get to meet other middle agers? Well, I'm a big fan of the site meetup.com. And more so for getting out there and, getting out there and really building up a life that you love. And there's lots of groups on Meetup that are they're all ages, but there's a lot of groups out there that are for people that are 40 and over, 50 and over, 60 and over, 70 and over, that do, they get together and they have like a girls' night out, or they have, they might have like a single dads group, or, I don't know, you name it. Like there's a lot of groups out there. And so that can be a really great way to meet people. And the benefit is if you're meeting people doing things that you like, then it's a win. Like if a great relationship surfaces from all of that, then fantastic. But if not, you are still meeting new people and you're having a good time. So I would check out meetup.com. Okay, Banaz, good point. Says, it seems like I just need to stay away from dating because I don't know how to do it and be real without scaring people or oversharing. Okay, great question. So that's another thing that takes practice. And this is something that I still struggle with too, is, and I think a lot of us tend to, we oftentimes don't like small talk. And especially if we're used to kind of being the caretaker and we're used to dealing with heavy things like people's emotions and their pain and what's really going on with them. So small talk can feel really small when you're used to dealing with things that are so big. And dating somebody, it can be kind of this challenge because we might want to get too deep too soon. And so realizing that kind of opening up and sharing things in like a kind of an appropriate way at a slow pace is important. That's one of the ways that we tend to rush intimacy, is that we want to get too deep too fast with other people. And they're like, whoa, I just met you. And oh my goodness, like you're telling me all about your divorce, or you're telling me, this really intense situation that happened to you, or like, it's too much. And so we oftentimes have a hard time kind of reining that back. And then you can see too, why that's such a vulnerability for us with emotional manipulators. If we're so open, for years, I really prided myself on being an open book. But when you're an open book to the wrong people, they're going to use that against you. And so it's really important just to go slow and to keep conversation light. And, kind of on that first date, second date, it's a gradual, you're gradually opening up each time you talk to them. Even though small talk might be really painful, it's just, how was your day? And like, you're just, do you have any plans this weekend? Or what'd you do last weekend? Or, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Or, you're just kind of keeping things at a surface level. And you might find it easier too, to start talking about them, and kind of like let them, most people are okay with talking about themselves. Like just let them kind of take the conversation and practice kind of practice those boundaries with all of that. So Tammy says, Dana, can you explain flying monkeys? Would somebody show interest in you just to fish for information about your ex? Absolutely. So flying monkey, the term comes from the Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch, manipulates her little minions, these little flying monkeys around her, to go attack Dorothy. So narcissists have kind of these people around them that they'll manipulate, and they'll do so by either telling like only they spin everything. So like they'll only tell their side of the story, or they'll just fabricate a whole different story. And normal, decent people, and their flying monkeys might be normal, decent people, but they've been manipulated. So they might hear from the narcissist, she's so crazy. I think she's an alcoholic. I don't know what her problem is. I divorced her. I stayed with her as long as I possibly could for the kids. And they're going to have this really sad story about how you're the bad guy and how they're the victim of you. And of course, anybody hearing that, it's going to be like, what a jerk. I can't believe she did that. Let's get her, right? And then they start going on the attack. But sometimes, so that's part of it. But then sometimes, yeah, they can just, again, like tell this whole story, get people really riled up, people thinking that they're doing the right thing might be trying to get information out of you, because remember, they think that you're the problem. So they're trying to get all this information out of you to then use against you down the road, or to help the ex, So it's another part of kind of knowing who's safe, Friends and family of your ex are not safe. Mutual friends, if they're still friends with your ex, are not safe. Like, these people are not safe to open up to reveal your cards to. And I think it's a good idea to assume whatever you say to them is going to get back to the narcissist. People love to gossip. And especially if they're hearing two very different sides to the story, or maybe they're trying to even help. And they think, well, if I can just let them know what they said, maybe they can work it out. Like, it's not safe. So something to think about. Yeah, Maria says, Banaz, it gets easier and you'll feel great not getting too personal. Yes, a great sign to tell if you're telling a person too much too soon is, how do you feel afterwards? Generally, when people feel like they're oversharing, they get really embarrassed. They feel shame. They feel anxious. Like, oh my goodness, I hope this person's not judging me. They feel fearful. They feel like they feel overly vulnerable. And it's so difficult when we're dating, especially when things are new, like that first month or so, at least, if we've really overshared and that person decides maybe they're not interested for whatever reason, maybe who knows, they're not interested. If they call things off, if we're going to feel shame and embarrassment and fear and concern of like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I've told them too much, or, oh, I scared them away. These are all signs that you're sharing too much. So a comfortable level of sharing is when it feels safe and comfortable to do so. And you realize that if you ended up kind of going your separate ways, that you don't feel like so incredibly vulnerable or ashamed. You're sharing things at about the same level. And here's the other thing with that, though, too, because a lot of emotional manipulators will oftentimes, one of the techniques they use is they'll get really deep right away. They'll start talking about their abusive parent, or their crazy ex, or within the first one or two conversations, they get way deep, way fast. And it's normal human nature for us to want to have kind of that equilibrium in a relationship. So if I were to tell you something incredibly personal, it's very common, it'd be very normal for you to then want to match that level of intensity and that level of personal story with me. It's how human beings are wired. So it's important to kind of pay attention. So just because they're telling you a lot of this really intense, deep stuff doesn't mean that you need to match their level of openness. And I think it's good to just realize that, every abusive person comes across in a different way. So what you experienced before you might not experience it in that exact same way again. So if you experienced an abusive person before who just never wanted to know anything about you, they just talked all about themselves, and they would have these bouts of rage and start putting you down or doing these kinds of things. But then the next person is incredibly charming, and they just want to talk, and they want to talk to you for hours on end, and they just hang on every single word you say. That it can still be just as problematic, but it's coming across in a different way. So instead of us, like somebody had mentioned earlier, it's not about us trying to figure them out. It's about us getting back into alignment with ourselves. Because once you get to that place where you're in tune with your emotions and you're kind of having this conversation, this internal conversation with them on a regular basis, and that takes practice, but you're more in tune with how you feel, and you're recognizing that when something feels uncomfortable or problematic or off, this is a sign, and to take that seriously, and to take the necessary corrections to get things like back in alignment, and to also have those healthy boundaries. Because when you have healthy boundaries and you realize, and this is a big one, you don't need to wait until they prove you right. Like, you don't need to wait until you catch them in bed with somebody in order to really fully believe that they're cheating. If it's squirrely behavior, it's squirrely behavior because something's, if all the signs are there that they're cheating, they're cheating. If there's all the signs that are there that they're being, controlling and abusive, it's because they're being controlling and abusive. And for us to move to a place where we're no longer second guessing ourselves so much, there's always going to be a degree of that. So please realize, I don't know if that ever really goes away. That's normal. That cognitive dissonance, it's something everybody experiences on a fairly regular basis, but we experience it often during a problematic situation. So if you're feeling perpetually confused, if you're feeling introspective, is it me? Is it them? Is this a problem? Is this not a problem? Am I making too big of a deal out of this? If you're asking yourself all of these questions, like, odds are it's a problem, that we're just slipping in and out of denial about it being a problem. So, but I think you'll find once you kind of shift your attention inward to paying attention to how you feel and realizing that you can walk away from a situation at any time. Like, you don't need like, hardcore proof. Like, this isn't a trial. Like, you don't need to have the body to wait until, like, you don't need that concrete proof that there's a problem. Like, everything that's off, that's enough. That's enough. So for me, I view it in this way of, like, I don't do relationships or friendships that are perpetually confusing, that are crazy making, or that are controlling, or that are critical. So those are kind of the main four. Those are automatic deal breakers. I just don't have time for it. There's nothing there. There's nothing there is what it is. So, if you can turn inward and realize that you have the power to walk away from problems and from problematic people, and then it's really, I think, really going to help you to learn to trust your judgment. And that takes practice. And also, it'll really help to learn for you to reinstate, or is that the word I'm looking for? Reinstill that trust. Because you're not looking to other people. You're not needing to be like, okay, I need to trust other people. A lot of people have problems with this. Like, then that's a big part of, like, the whole hypervigilance part of having PTSD is they're like, I just don't trust other people. And the reality is, probably before this happened, we were too trusting. And so now, again, it's that Goldilocks thing. Like, before we were too trusting, now we don't trust at all. Like, that middle bowl of that, that middle ground is where we ideally need to be. And the big takeaway is that trust is something that's earned. It's not something blindly given. So we might have been going through life thinking that other people were like us. They were kind, normal, decent people. And when they acted in a kind, normal, decent way, we were very quick to just take them at face value and think that they had good intentions because we had good intentions. And so, but the reality is, it takes time. It takes time to really get to know a person. And the best way is to look at their actions. How do they behave on a consistent basis? Normal, decent people have normal, decent behavior. They don't lie, they don't cheat, they don't use, abuse, and steal and exploit and do all of that kind of stuff. So, and I think once you can get to the place where you trust yourself enough that to keep yourself safe, you feel so much more in control of your life because you're no longer putting your trust in other people so much. You're not thinking to yourself like, okay, I really need to trust these other people to not hurt me. You realize I trust myself enough to walk away if they do, and to realize that I will be okay. Because I have this life of abundance. I have these friends and these hobbies and these other things going for me. I'll have hurt feelings and I'll just have hurt. I'll be grieving the loss of what I thought we had. That's normal. But it's not going to be the end of my world if they let me down, because people are people and everybody's got their own stuff going on. And half the time, probably all of the time, frankly, when somebody lets us down or hurts us, it has very little to do with us. It's generally what's going on with them. So if we can realize that and keep our kind of self-worth and our hurt feelings in two different buckets, then things, we're not putting so much weight and expectation on this other person to be exactly what we need them to be. Like then they're just free. They're free to be themselves, and like they can be themselves. We are going to accept them for who they are, meaning we're not going to try to change them. Like, okay, you can be who you're going to be, and then I'm going to respond accordingly. So if who they are is abusive, then I'm going to respond accordingly. I'm not going to stick around and try to change them. I'm just going to distance myself from them. And it just takes all of this weight off of us trying to kind of drag that horse to water. And here's kind of the interesting thing too, is when we can get to that place of kind of this acceptance where we're like, I see you for what you really are and for how you're acting. And it might have something to do with your childhood or what happened to you. Like we love ourselves enough to realize that there's not an excuse for being like, we're not going to be mistreated. But if that abusive person, is on the more mild end, and they're like, okay, well, maybe, they are wanting to change some things, then that really is going to be their only wake up call, is us not putting up with it. And, hopefully, but again, like we can't set boundaries with the hopes that they'll change. We have to set boundaries because it's the right thing for us to do. And if they do change, then that's fantastic. But I mean, again, with anybody changing, change is a messy process for all of us. And it kind of back to the whole like codependency thing is, how we do something is how we tend to do everything. So that's been our pattern throughout our life, has been being an overgiver. And to get us back in alignment, it's a lifelong process of getting ourselves back into alignment. And for a person that's on the opposite side of the spectrum, it's going to be the same thing. So it's not just them not yelling or not belittling or not hitting. They have to unlearn. They have to have the consistent desire to unlearn all of that and then replace it with positive behavior. And that's quite the undertaking. So that was kind of a tangent. I apologize for that. Kevin says, thanks for sharing your experiences and growth. I need to keep focused on self-improvement and boundaries with toxic people. Yeah. But you know what, though? Here's the thing is it's like learning to walk. You're not going to do it perfectly. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall. And so don't get upset with yourself when that happens, not if, when that happens. Try to replace that judgment with curiosity. Easier said than done, but try to replace it with curiosity. What happened? Where did, like, what was I thinking? What cues was I possibly misreading? What were they doing? How did they slip under my radar this time? Because again, you're waking up to all of this. And it's a huge realization to be like, to realize, wow, other people in this world are not like me. And it's very normal for a person to then start seeing, okay, well, this is how I experienced problematic behavior. And they're like, you know what, my father drank a lot, so that's a problem. And my ex-wife, she yelled a lot, and so then that's a problem. And my boss at my old job was incredibly controlling and micromanaging, and that's a problem. And so then we now have this baseline of what we consider a problem. And so now we're kind of thinking like, okay, and this is just how the human brain links things up. So then the human brain is like, okay, anybody that drinks like your father is a problem. Anybody that yells like your ex-wife is a problem. Anybody that controls or micromanages you like your boss is a problem. And while that might be true, problematic people, there's a spectrum out there, and they might come across in various ways. So it's important for us to kind of see the forest through the trees and not think about it in such rigid terms of, this is either a problem or it's not a problem, if that makes sense. Like it's getting to know the person and the situation and examining that. Like it's this continual of like, okay, well, is this pattern still active within me? Am I still falling for love bombing? Am I still getting sucked into these whirlwind romances? If so, what can I do different next time? Yeah, I would agree. Sunny says, anybody that reminds you of a past narcissist, walk away. Yeah. Yep. I agree. That's been a big red flag for me. If I find myself thinking, boy, you know what? This person really reminds me of so-and-so, Jack or Steve or any number of like really disordered people out there in my life. Like that's a sign. Like your brain, and you might not be able to pinpoint why, and that's okay, but your brain is picking up on stuff at a deeper level that your conscious brain is not aware of. So pay attention to that closely. It's worth listening to. Our brains rarely warn us about danger when danger isn't there. Okay. Dragana, hi. Says, okay, Thrivers, it was great seeing you all. I have to go to sleep. Big project is still on. I love you all. Keep thriving. Cool. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Yes, Bonnie, I hear you. Says, I feel like Rumpelstiltskin. I'm waking up after a long time. Like I took too long. Now getting out is going to be a nightmare. Getting out, it might be a big challenge. Support groups can be great for this, and because there's, I think one of the biggest challenges when a person's been in a relationship like this, for 20, 30, any length of time, but especially when you're talking decades, is what's very common is they'll get out of this toxic relationship and that feeling of freedom is very fleeting. And then they often feel like, oh my goodness, I have this huge void in my life. I don't know what to do anymore. Like because any ending of any relationship, no matter how bad, leaves a person feeling very disjointed. There's still, again, no matter how bad a relationship was, there's still that routine that's there. There's still that kind of warm body in the house with you. And So it takes a bit to kind of get readjusted to living life, being single, and to making your space your own, and to owning your own time. And it some a big step that you can make now, which I encourage people to make anyhow, even if you're not planning on leaving, or even if you're not even dating anybody or married to anybody, is to make sure that you are building up a life that you really enjoy, that you have hobbies, that you're out there meeting people, that you have things in your life that make your life enjoyable, especially if you're planning on ending one of these relationships, and you've got the time. You've got the time to kind of, shore up the dam, so to speak. So meetup.com can be really great for that, and build it because you're building up a support system, and you're because if you go to leave, there is going to be that big void. You'll still feel it, but you're going to feel it a lot less if you've got other positive, enjoyable things in your life. So just kind of something to consider. And just prepare for it. It's it's like quitting smoking, right? Or quitting anything that is not good for you. And it's important to anticipate, like, there's going to be cravings, there's going to be challenges, you're going to have to do a lot of things different. You might have to stop associating with certain people. It's like quitting an addiction, drinking, or kind of whatever it might be, and kind of relearning how to get back and just build a different life is what it is. But you can do it. A lot of people, if you can prepare yourself for this, then I think you can find that a lot of it can be very freeing. A lot of people will leave and they're like, man, it is so nice to just not be yelled at, or to not be controlled, or to just be able to have my own space and be able to make the food that I want to make. And if I want to leave dirty dishes in the sink, I can. And if I want to cut my hair, I can. If I want to grow my hair out, I can. If I want to wear makeup, I can. If I want to, like, get a dog, I can. If I want to work, I can. Like, you just realize that you have the keys back to your life. And it can be very exhilarating and very empowering. Yes. And that's so true. Maria says, I love the saying that you can never unlearn this. That's very comforting and protecting. Yes. And here's the thing. It's sort of like, Alice in Wonderland. Like, the further you go down this rabbit hole and the more you become aware, it's true. Like, you can't unsee this. Like, you can't unlearn this. Like, there is only ever forward. Like, life is about growth. We can never go back to what was for anything. Life was not designed to be that way, and there's a lot of, I think there can be a lot of, like, remorse and anger and feelings of grief that come from that. But if we realize, like, you guys, you're learning, like, you're waking up to this, and you're realizing that it's a big realization to realize that other people are not like you. It's huge, huge. And, learning about healthy boundaries, and learning about how problematic behavior feels, and how you specifically tend to cope with things. It's just, man, I tell you, it's powerful stuff. Like, you might the lessons, the aha moments, they just keep coming, and it might seem bad in some ways. Like, for example, when I started doing these, I've probably gained, I don't even know, at least 20 pounds since I started doing these videos. And I was so bummed about that for so long. And it's been very difficult for me to do these live streams every single week. And I'm not a fan. I don't even like seeing pictures of myself, let alone seeing myself on video. Like, it's just all of that like judgment and, kind of like anger and like, you can't deny it, right? Like, it's easy to tell yourself, oh, that's a bad picture or an unflattering angle, or that shirt is just too long, like you can justify it in a picture. But when you see a video of yourself, like, there's no hiding. And it's hard to live in reality, right? But the power in that has been, I've learned so much. Like, gaining this weight has seriously been such a blessing in disguise. I did not realize that I was an emotional eater. I did not realize, like, I didn't realize that I was taking on so much stress. I didn't realize I was eating for other people's emotions, like not even my own. It was very, very, very eye-opening, and a sign of like, okay, Dana, here we are again. Like, things need to get a little bit more in alignment. Like, this is a sign something's off. So the point is, even if we're having these results surface in our life, no matter what it might be, if you're finding yourself doing things that aren't working, like you're gaining weight, or you're losing a lot of weight, or you're spending a lot of money, or you're finding yourself avoiding your bank account altogether, or you're drinking more than normal, or you started smoking again, or, like you're maybe becoming promiscuous, or you're wanting to avoid people altogether, all like whatever is, or you're hoarding stuff. Maybe you're finding yourself like buying a lot of books or pillows for your bed, or one thing I think I mentioned a while ago, I had this weird, and I'm getting a lot better with it, but for like a while there, I was getting this kind of, not major, but it was enough that it was other people noticed, like kind of this weird hoarding thing with food. And I would bring all these like canned goods and even like fresh fruit and vegetables, and then end up throwing a lot of the fresh fruit and vegetables away, which that bothered me so much because I hate wasting things. But I like couldn't figure out what was going on for the longest time. And I think it was just anxiety. And it was that need of like, it was sort of like my internal squirrel, like preparing for a storm. It was weird, or for winter. It was just weird. And so I don't know. I guess the point is like paying attention to what is manifesting in your external environment, because odds are it's a reflection of what's going on in your internal environment. Powerful stuff. So it's worth looking around. Truth Seeker says, I was eating to rebel from my coach narcissist. It's silly, but it's what I felt. So donuts nonstop for 3 months, and I gained 30 pounds. Still no regrets. Yeah. It's that turning inward and examining, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it this kind of active rebellion? I'll catch myself doing that too, where I'm wanting to eat something that I know I shouldn't eat. And here's how I can tell if something's out of alignment with me, or if there's more going on, is it's the relationship with that thing. So with food, if I'm finding myself basically hiding what I'm eating, or if I'm feeling shame while I'm eating it. Like if somebody were to walk in the door, and if I'm eating a bowl of ice cream, I shouldn't feel like I need to hide that. But I can tell if I've got some more like unaddressed emotional stuff there, if I'm feeling the need to hide what I'm doing, whatever that might be, money that I'm spending, food that I'm eating, something that I'm drinking, whatever. So it's interesting when you start thinking about your own actions this way, and like, why am I doing that? Why am I hiding this? Or Why am I eating this or spending this money on this? And, too, with, if you find yourself, you're like, yeah, you know what? This is how I'm choosing to cope. Like, I've had a long day and I'm going to have a glass of wine. Then it's that's not necessarily the problem. And the problem is when we're doing these things and we're not aware of why, or we're not aware of like what need that we're meeting. And that's of course assuming that you're not, alcoholism isn't a challenge that you're facing. Then having a glass of wine would be a problem. But just knowing like, yeah, I'm feeding an emotional need right now. That's what this ice cream is about. Tammy says, my ex was OCD about the house. My apartment has gone the exact opposite. I would be mortified if somebody saw it. And it might be your way, like subconsciously, of trying to regain that power and control back in your own life. Of, you know what? He was so regimented about everything. And this might be your way of being like, you know what? I am not going to make the bed and I'm not going to do the dishes for a week and I'm not going to clean the bathtub and I'm just going to let everything just get really trashed out as an act of rebellion. Or that could be part of it, or it could be some depression kicking in too. So that might be something to kind of examine, like, okay, why am I doing this? And at what point, when is it a problem? Because sometimes it does feel so good just to be like, you know what, I'm just not going to shower for a few days and I'm not going to make the bed and I'm just going to be grungy and my house is going to be grungy and I don't even care. Like, it's just kind of that inner child wanting a break. But if it's going over into depression where you're overwhelmed and you're like, I just don't have the energy for this and what have you, then that's something else. And sometimes too, setting a timer. Uh, and of course, like, you need to be the judge of kind of how, if this is depression, like how severe it is and kind of what you might need to do in order to kind of get more back into alignment with yourself. But, one thing that oftentimes helps me if I've just been a slob for any length of time is to set a timer or to start doing like small things. Like, you know what? The rest of my house might be a mess, but my bed's going to get made. It's kind of like planting your flag on the beach, right? Like you're like declaring like this is the one little ocean of calm in my life is my bed. And I'm not making my bed because I feel like it's the right thing to do. I'm doing it because I really enjoy slipping between the sheets and having this comforter and everything at night. And I like to be able to give that to myself. So it's just, kind of figuring out how you feel about all of that. And maybe you don't care. Maybe you're like, I love a messy bed. Like I just love sliding into messy covers. And that's fine too. It's all about what works, what works for you. People are talking about having a lot of pillows. That's hilarious. Katrina says, yeah, there are too many pillows on my couch. I can't even sit on it. I sit on a chair, but the couch looks nice. Hilarious. Yes, I'm a big pillow fan too. Sure. Katrina says, so far, Dana has me counting my pillows, my mugs, my cans of beans, and flossing my teeth. That's hilarious. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think so oftentimes we think that emotional awareness, like this awakening, is kind of like the clouds parting, and it's like this peaceful, ha 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 kind of moment. I'm like, oh, how lovely. I have awakened. And we seem to think that it's kind of this event, like it's this one-time thing, right? And it really isn't. It's this ongoing process of little moments like that, where we have those moments of clarity, but oftentimes that clarity doesn't descend on us like the clouds parting and the light warming our face. It's Clarity is very rarely does it come like that. It normally comes the exact opposite. Clarity is it's the 20 pounds that we realize that we've gained, or it's the bounce check in our bank account, or it's we get fired from a job, or we have a fight over Thanksgiving dinner. More often than not, it's that. Because oftentimes it takes something so extreme in order for it to catch our attention that something's out of alignment. So, but then it's cool, because then when you can realize those major issues, when they do surface in your life, they have a message for you. Like, they're not all bad, even though it feels bad. So if you can kind of reframe how you see it, and you're like, okay, this is a message kind of wrapped in sandpaper, but it's still a message. Like, let me see what's in there. That's that's really, really powerful stuff, but it can be very difficult, because I think it's our default to want to slip into, or maybe not even to want to just slip into like judgment and being critical and that self-loathing, or to not even line things up, to just be like, oh, I gained 20 pounds and, I lack discipline. I lack willpower. What's wrong with me? And we get so down on ourselves, and we think, I just need to go on a diet. Like, that's calories in, calories out, problem solved. And that's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not so much about what we're eating. It's about what's eating us. And until we can figure out that what's eating us, we might get our weight under control, but then that same issue, because those issues don't go away, they need our attention. They have a message. They're like a very persistent messenger, and they're not going to go away until we hear that message. So we might get our weight in alignment, but the next thing we know, we start drinking, or next thing we know, we start spending more money than we can afford, or it's going to come out in a different way. So if we can dig deeper and figure out, okay, what's really going on here? Because most people don't just gain weight. Like, there's normally a deeper reason. Most people don't gain weight because they're like, oh, I just didn't know. I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that I shouldn't be eating, pizza 3 meals a day. Like, people know, like, it's the year 2017. People know, like, fruits and vegetables and blah, blah, right? So it's deeper than that. There's a lot of emotional reasons that drive a lot of us to eat stuff we shouldn't be, I don't want to say shouldn't be eating. So I don't like the idea of having foods that are off limits, but, eating foods that aren't as nourishing for us as other foods. Let's maybe put it that way. Yeah, journaling is huge. Huge, huge, huge. Kevin says, journaling sometimes helps me to de-stress and gain perspective. Yes, I would agree. Oh, Maria, you're spot on. She says, I was wired backwards. I was constantly training myself to tolerate more BS when I needed to significantly lower my tolerance to all the BS. Yes. Yes, I can completely relate to that. I bet you a lot of people here can. Because, if we've been that person, like that we've been so accommodating for so long and we're continually being accommodated, because if we're so in tune with everybody else's pain and we don't like conflict and we don't like saying no and we don't know how to set boundaries, then the only tool that we have in our toolkit is to be more accommodating. And so then we get really good at twisting ourselves into an emotional pretzel, thinking that if we just raised our tolerance level for that BS and that nonsense, then everything would be okay. But like you said, the reality is, no, the cure to this is to actually distance ourselves from it. But for so many of us, the idea of distancing ourselves from a problematic person is not even on our radar. And then when we realize you can do that, like you don't have to put yourself in harm's way. It doesn't matter if they're family. It doesn't matter if they're a friend. It doesn't matter if it's a coworker. Like, you don't need to be putting yourself in harm's way ever. Then oftentimes it's so empowering. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that was an option on the table. It's powerful. And then people will, it's going down that rabbit hole. Then the next thought is, why did I not realize that earlier? Like, that's weird. And then the next thought is, we start encountering other people that don't think that think, no, you need to learn to get better at handling BS. And then we kind of slip into that introspection of, wait a minute, is it like what's healthy and what's not, like what's normal and what's toxic? Like, I don't know. And then we're kind of like lost in that fog again, because now we're confused because we're getting all of this like well-intended bad advice from people that are like, oh, but you know what? You really do need to turn yourself into an emotional pretzel because she's your mother and she's not getting any younger. So, twist away. That's your job as a child, her child. Don't you love your mother? and it sounds so convincing and we feel so terrible. And then we start thinking like, I just need to really twist myself into a better pretzel. Like that's what needs to happen. Or the same, I'm in a relationship. This is what this means. Like, I need to keep the peace. In order to keep the peace, I just, need to learn how to walk on eggshells better. And so what a lot of us tend to do, we start reading self-help books. We start going to therapy. We start going to maybe marriage retreats. We start doing what we think we need to do in order to fix the solution. But we're approaching this with this kind of this codependent mindset of, we either need to get better at handling things that we shouldn't be handling, or we need to fix this person who is abusive, who doesn't want to change. And hopefully if you get a good therapist, they'll be able to see what you're doing for what it is. But I'll tell you, a lot of them won't. And they'll be right alongside of you, rooting you on as you're twisting yourself into a better pretzel. And it's just, then you're really well on your way down that merry path of madness. If you've got other people with that well-intended bad advice telling you how to get better at putting up with stuff you shouldn't be putting up with. Sunny says, I no longer need a relationship with fixer-uppers. Yeah, I hear you. I like to think of it in terms of, are you looking for a partner or are you looking for a project? Because here's the thing with projects, is they require a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And the vast majority of time, people that are projects don't want to be fixed. So then we're just exhausting ourselves and we're annoying them. This is where it kind of comes back to the whole acceptance thing. which is not the same as allowance. These are two very different concepts. So accepting a person, being like, wow, this person has some major stuff that they need to work on. But the acceptance part is, this is their stuff that they need to work on. And I wish them light and love, but I can't fix this, and I for sure can't be treated like this. So I have no other option but to distance myself. So we can still accept somebody as they are, but then not allow it in our life. That's, I think, the piece of the puzzle that's missing for a lot of people. Amanda says, exactly. Yes. Yes. Huge, right? It's like looking at these this programming that we've all gotten, but like looking at it in a slightly different way makes so much more sense. Let's see. Yes, Maria says, I've also learned to stop looking for validation. That's huge. Yeah, powerful stuff. I am the same. Like before, I think a lot of it, I think it's part of waking up is really what it is. You know, before I would have said that it was a lot of that PTSD. And I think I know it was. I mean, it was the kind of that hypervigilance of, like, I can't trust anybody. I don't know who's safe. I'm having all this anxiety, like what's going on. But really it's an awakening. Like you're seeing the world in a very different way. And one of the big aha moments in my life, because I was the same thing, right? This is like, I went through the same thing. So dividing people into groups of like, they're either a narcissist or they're normal. So they're either normal or they're toxic. Like that was my thinking. It was very black and white. Like there was a line in the sand. I needed to know which group a person fit into. But I kept getting all of this well-intended bad advice. And from people, like I said, who had good intentions. And that really messed with my head for a long time. Because I'm like, well, maybe it is me. Like if they're thinking that I need to give this guy another chance when he was really like a creepy on the date, then maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I should give him a second chance. Then I realized that the world is not divided into two groups. If we're going to divide it into groups, it's really divided into three. Okay. So it's not just like normal and toxic, it's healthy, normal, and toxic. This might sound very obvious to you guys, but this was an absolute game changer for me. And so when you start realizing that normal people, because all of this, it's not really divided into three groups, right? It's a spectrum. Normal people have a lot of the same programming as the rest of us. And so if we're listening to somebody who's excusing bad behavior, if they're saying, well, you know what? Yeah, he might have really been inappropriate with you, but, maybe he was nervous, or, she started yelling at you, and maybe it's because of her childhood. Like normal people excuse stuff that they shouldn't excuse. Healthy people, that's the game changer. That's when you find healthy boundaries, and there's no excuse for abuse, and you need to move yourself to a place where you're safe and sane. And the mindset of a healthy person is very, very different. And they're going to encourage you, to do what's right for you. And they're not going to excuse problematic stuff. And, yeah, I mean, there's open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. You're being treated with dignity and respect. They understand that trust is something that's earned over time and not blindly given. They respect your boundaries. You can have conversations with them if and when, it's really when, that something does happen. Like they're going to be solutions-oriented, like they're a team player. all of that stuff is present with the healthy person. And so when you realize that there's kind of these three different camps of people out there, then it makes it a lot easier to see which kind of person, which mindset is giving me the advice. It's really eye-opening. So, and when we can get healthy enough that we can trust our judgment, because we trust ourselves enough to know what we need to do to stay safe, and we don't feel bad about it. Like, or if we do feel bad about it, we get over it and we still do what we need to do in order to stay safe and sane. So once you can learn that you can trust yourself to move yourself out of harm's way, then you're going to quit looking to others for validation. So you could be in a whole room full of people that disagree with you. And they're like, you know what? Yeah, I know that guy, or that gal, they cheated on you like multiple times and they kept doing silent treatment and freaking out and yelling and doing all this stuff, but you should give them a second chance. And let's say it's a room full of therapists, friends, family, and like people at church, right? Like that you trust your judgment enough to respectfully disagree with them and still do what you feel that you need to do for your safety and your sanity. It's powerful, powerful. So validation is nice, but it's a game changer when you really don't need it. Let's see. Maria says, I read a ton of books on boundaries to give me support. I liked Boundaries by Henry Cloud, the one by Anne Catherine, the one in the book club. We need to dedicate a stream to boundaries. I agree. I think that would be a really great conversation. And it's interesting that you bring up that book by Henry Cloud. So the book, real quick, book club is tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the book that we're going to be discussing is The Betrayal Bond by Patrick Carnes. And the book club book for October is Necessary Endings. Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. And that book, if you haven't read that book, it's probably one of my, I would say it's in my top 5 favorite books, so I don't know. I'll be curious to see kind of what you think about it. I will give you a heads up. The book Necessary Endings, I was probably about 40 pages into it. And I really thought it was a business book. I thought I had the wrong book, but it's not. It pertains to business. It pertains to relationships. It pertains to everything. And it's flipping fantastic. So much of what's in that book, I wish it's one of those things, like if I could go back and tell 10-year-old me some things, it would be about necessary endings, because that was a message like we talked about earlier in the live stream. A lot of us didn't get that. We just thought commitment was forever. Friendships were forever. You hang on until you can't hang on anymore. And this book is all about the exact opposite. Book club, I don't know. It's going to depend on how many people hop on tomorrow night. I'm going to say, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, depending. But I will post, I don't know if I'm going to have my notes organized by like enough to post on my website tomorrow, but that'll be my goal. So at a minimum, you can always watch the recording of this too, or listen to it if you can't make it, if you're interested, if you want to. And then also to get a list of the book club books that we're reading, you can go to my website, thriveafterabuse.com / I think it's either book-club or just book club, all one word. But there's a tab on my website which is the list of all the books that we're reading through the end of the year. And I need to get with Lucy here in the near future so we can figure out what books we're reading for 2018. So we can get on that. Okay, let's see. Lisa says, I heard from a family member that my ex is planning on staying at my house the next time he is in town. We've been no contact for over a year. It's funny how delusional they are. Fat chance. Good for you. Yeah. So that's a great example of a big boundary push. Either that or he's like trying to provoke you into a reaction. And then holding a boundary. And then so let's take this situation. I would encourage you to anticipate this. Okay. Anticipate. What are you going to do if he shows up or texts you and he says, I'm on your doorstep. I have no place to stay. I thought it would be fine for me to stay here. I have no car. I have no hotel. I have no money for a hotel. I mean, can't I just stay with you? It's only going to be for 3 days. I mean, I thought we were friends. Like, prepare yourself emotionally for that, and then prepare an answer. So, an answer might be like, well, I'm really sorry that you thought that would be okay. It's not, you didn't check with me, and we're not like, we're not on those terms. So no, or you just stay no contact and you don't respond at all whatsoever, or if he does show up on your doorstep, maybe you call the police and just say, like, my ex showed up. He thinks he's going to stay at my house. This guy's totally nuts. He's not welcome here. I don't want to talk to him. This is all about power and control, and I'm not feeding into it. So can you please have him leave my property? Here's the thing with validation. Other people might think that's really extreme, but they don't know until they've actually dealt with a total, like you said, delusional person like this, who is just difficult and a crazy maker. Lisa says, yeah, I've been playing out some scenarios. I think I'm just not going to answer the door and screen all of my calls. You might, she says, I will totally call the cops on him. Good for you. And, this might be another thing too, would be, did he ever at any time have a key to your house? Like, is this a possibility that maybe you need to get your locks changed? Postmodern says the police had said if you rent, up to your door is public property. Yeah, but harassing a person isn't. So like knocking on the door, hanging outside, like loitering and harassing and stalking is not ever illegal. So I would say try to get them on grounds with that. Richter says, what happens if you call the police on them? What do they do? Well, every person's different, right? So sometimes only your situation best. So sometimes it can work. It will, the one thing that you can bank on is it's not going to go well. Like, they get very, very angry because it's that sense of entitlement of, I should be able to stay here. What's so wrong with you? You're so mean to me by setting a boundary. I should be able to do whatever I want to do. So how dare you treat me this way? Don't you know who I am? Kind of a mentality. And you're not dealing with a reasonable, rational person. So anticipate that it's not going to go well. Sometimes they respect police and they respect law if they know that they have to. But I wouldn't really bank on it. A piece of paper like a restraining order isn't going to keep you safe. You really need to it's no replacement for like situational awareness and for having protection and for, calling 911 if they show up or doing these things. So, just being safe, being aware of your environment, not hesitating to call the police if you feel threatened. What did the police do to them? If they were to show up on your property, they would probably show up and they'd probably talk to them, would be the first step, would be my guess. And they'd probably ask them to leave. And then if they don't leave and they start escalating and they start becoming like, aggressive with the police, then the police might end up arresting them, depending on how like aggressive and confrontational and much of a threat that they come across as. If you get a restraining order, then if they show up anywhere near you, then the police will come out and they are generally arrested. So. Okay, let's see. Oh, Lindsay. Okay, great question. She says, if I called the police, he would retaliate. I just wouldn't answer the door. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading Vicky's comment. Vicky says, if I called the police, he would retaliate. I just wouldn't answer the door. I feel safer doing that. Yes. And this is where it comes down to like, your situation and like the level of kind of instability in this person that you're dealing with. And because sometimes, yes, like calling the police can really set them off. Whenever a target starts setting boundaries or goes to leave, that's when they really lash out. And so it's important to anticipate that and to prepare for it. Like you're not dealing with a reasonable, rational person. You're not dealing with somebody who has the same set of morals and values that you do. And also, if you've been preparing yourself to leave for any length of time, and if they don't realize that that's coming, or even if they do realize that that's coming, if they don't agree with it, they're going to lash out. And so this is why sometimes people, if they need to stay safe, they need to kind of come up with a safety plan. So, and even if you do leave, coming up with a safety plan of, okay, what am I going to do if they show up? And how am I going to handle this? And so maybe, yes, one solution might be, I'm just not going to answer the door, or I'm going to get cameras on the outside of my house, or I'm going to, immediately call a friend, or I'm going to have some protection at my house, whatever that might mean for you. Lindsay says, was this a question asked or is this the topic for the video? Sorry, I'm new here. Hi, Lindsay. Well, welcome. There's no topic. We just talk about anything and everything. So if you have a question, feel free to ask away. And if I don't get to it, I'm sure somebody else here in the chat will. Yes, good. Elise says, I called the police to make a safe escape, then got blamed by the narcissist and flying monkeys. Luckily, I was in therapy, so that validated my decision. Yes. And people, that's the thing, is it's so crazy making when you're around all these people where you're like, I know what I'm experiencing. Like, I know this is not right and this is not normal. And I feel like my life is in danger and I can't breathe and I'm having all this anxiety and terror. Terror should never be part of a relationship. Like, that's a sign that you're in an abusive relationship. Terror, fear, guilt, one-sided dynamic where you're feeling you're really just being dragged through hell. These are all signs that you're in an abusive relationship. And and it's okay. It's okay for us to leave any situation that isn't sometimes, like in this book, Necessary Endings, sometimes a situation, like he gives the analogy, I won't get too into it because we'll talk about it tomorrow night, but he gives the analogy of like your life is like a rose bush. And if you want it to yield prize winning roses, you're going to have to trim away some of the branches. And some of the branches might be dead. Some of them might be sick and dying. And some of them might have buds all over them and be healthy, but not what you need in order to grow those prize winning roses. And so thinking of it that way, like a situation doesn't have to be like totally toxic or dead in order for us to trim that branch off. It might just not be right enough. And that's a whole nother like next level. You level up when you get to that place where now you're choosing between great and good. And then you're getting rid of good to make room for great. So I hope that helps. Yes, I agree. Salon says, if they lash out in front of the police, for me, it's better as it proves to the cops that the narcissist is unhinged and that I need protection. I agree. But Abana says, I keep forgetting who they are because I see the broken inner child in them. I can become forgetful that they are draining. Trying to live in the moment with a narcissist and crazies doesn't work. Yes. Yes. And it is hard. It's hard if especially if you can see like that brokenness, like your heart, if if you are kind of that over empathizer, you see that and like you want to make it okay. I think that's kind of the bend in our personality of like we want, we just want to, I think what it really is we want to give this hurting person all of the love that we never got because we just don't want anybody to go through that. And so we just want to be able to love them whole so they don't feel that. We want to be able to fix their broken child, their broken inner child, when really the work needs to be done on our inner broken child. But we see that sad, hurt little kid, and we want to try to make everything okay, but it doesn't work that way. I wish it was as simple as like kind of pulling the thorn out of the lion's paw and then the lion is fine. But this is the work that they would need to do to heal all of that stuff. And it's a lifelong process, and if it's impossible, I mean, a person they have to acknowledge that there's a problem in order for them to even have the hopes of changing it. And that's the challenge with them, is that they don't see that there's a problem. And so then there's no motivation to change. Sunny says, I want him fixed like a dog. Oh gosh. Inner Fire. Hello. Inner Fire says, before my narcissist, I perceived the setting boundaries and having high standards as a judgment against me. Now, after abuse, I know that this is what people do to live a healthy life. Yes. So a lot of times people, overgivers, we tend to we feel a sense of purpose in life, and we know how to overgive. Like that's something we were really good at, and being really in tune with the pain in other people. And the idea of us saying no, of us setting boundaries, of us like letting people, of us like not turning ourselves into an emotional pretzel and learning to tolerate more BS seems selfish. It seems rude. It seems very uncomfortable and very unnatural for us. but it's learning a new skill. And over time, it does become more and more comfortable. It just takes practice. But yeah, it's what's healthy. Yeah. Postmodern says, I don't want him fixed. I just want him out of my life. I know he's not going to change. Giving to him does not give me purpose. I just want to be able to ignore him and not react. Yes. Yeah. And that's a good place to be at, where we get to that place where we're like, you know what? Like, this just, I'm done. Like, I am just done. And yeah, powerful stuff. But and then it's difficult because now you've got this person who's entitled and selfish and has no insight into what they're doing is a problem, or they have insight, they just don't care. There's no remorse. It can be absolutely exhausting, and it can be very frustrating, especially if other people don't see it for what it is, and this person's just kind of unrelenting in their pursuit and in their harassment and stalking of you. Yes. Well said, Maria. She says, the cycle that killed me was I overgave from the beginning. They never earned it. And I stayed fighting, wanting a return on my investment. Now I don't overgive and overinvest. I give evenly and I give equally. Yes. Yes. I hear you. I hear you. And that overgiving in the beginning can be so difficult for us to see. It's like, because I think we're just so used to being this way, so we overgive of our time. Yes, you want to talk to me, and we're letting them set the pace. Oh, you want to text and talk to me for 3 or 4 hours every single day? Okay. You want to see me every single weekend? Oh, okay. We're just going along with it. They're setting the pace, and we're just going along with it because we're not comfortable saying no. And so we're over giving. And then when they do start, the bouts of rage, the belittling, the yelling, the name calling, the put downs, the provoking jealousy, that all of the crazy making of it all, then we start giving multiple chances. It's the second chance. It's the 22nd chance. It's the 222nd chance. And it's the thinking that, like you said, if we stay, I want to return on my investment. So like in poker, there's a term called being pot committed. It's like when a person's playing a poker hand and they've already sunk so much money really into the hand, that they feel obligated to stay and play the hand out. And a lot of times people feel like that with a relationship. They're like, I'm pot committed. Like, I've been in this thing for 30 years. I have all my money, all this time tied up with somebody. I'm going to have to continue to forgive, that they keep cheating and lying and siphoning funds and doing all these things. I'm going to have to continue to stay because I've already spent, 20 or 30 years with them, or even a year or 4 years or 10 or however long. It's this idea of like, I'm already too invested, I can't leave now. But, throwing good money after bad is never a winning solution. And same, throwing good time after bad is not going to turn things around. So yeah, Maria says, learning to stop overgiving, over attaching is one of the greatest life lessons. You then go into all interactions much more holy and healthy. I now mirror investment. Yes, I agree. It's powerful. You're right. It's such a game changer, like my mom, here's an example. My mom was telling me about a friend of hers who has really severe rheumatoid arthritis, and she's had like her spine fused. She's had, I don't even know how many operations, like 30 or 40. And so the point being, she's continually in the hospital. And my mom was saying that, um, she happily, because they're friends, will take her to and from the hospital, and she'll like water her plants and feed her animals and stuff while she's in the hospital, for a few days. And then she comes back out and goes home. And her friend always buys her, either takes her out for lunch or like buys her a little gift card. And my mom was saying that she was kind of upset by this because she's like, you know what, we're friends and this is what friends are for. And I, my stance on it was, I agree. I think, friends do help each other out, but at the same time, I think it really shows her friend's mindset of, I really want to keep things, I want to avoid resentment, and I want to keep things on an equal ground to show my appreciation. And it's because you are such a good friend, because I value you so much, I am going to take you out to lunch and I am going to show you my appreciation. And so I was encouraging my mom, accept that appreciation for what it is. It doesn't mean that you're somehow like acquaintances or that you're not friends. It means that she values you so much. She doesn't want to feel like she's taking too much. And so it's so nice when there's just things on the level like that. Cause man, I tell you, I used to do things. I would overgive, like in so many ways, give things I could not comfortably give. I have had people, pretty much virtual strangers, move in with me. I'm not even kidding you, live for free in my house because I'm like, man, they're in a bad spot. They need a place to stay. I have room. Like this knee-jerk reaction where I would put myself in these awful situations, and then all of this resentment would build. But I was the one that created it, and they were totally unequal situations, and they would continue on until they got so bad that I generally freaked out and like would make them leave. But it was me. Like it was all me much earlier upstream. That's, so like catching myself. And this is still a process of like when I am jumping in to try to save somebody else and then it doesn't work out. And then it's a mess. So yeah, point being, yes, I agree. Overgiving and over attaching is huge, 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 huge. New Chris says that's literally called the sunk cost fallacy. It's a business term. Yes. Yes, you are correct. Chris says, I've been described as too naive, too trusting, too helping. And then that might be something to look at and see, is there some validity in that? Yes, Maria, so right on. Dana, yes, our personality was literally structured around this idea that we are our giving. This is how we gain entry into relationships. It's sad and wrong. No more. Yes, I agree. I forget who said this. Somebody said this in the website support group a while back when we read that book by Pete Walker. What is it? The CPTSD book, I think From Surviving to Thriving is the book. And they had said that it was such a wake up call when they realized that kind of this over giving, he calls it fawning, as it is not their personality. It's a defense mechanism. I will never forget that. Like that was so profound of realizing that. And it's just, like I said, it's pulling a string on a sweater, like all of this stuff. When you start, it keeps going and going and going. It's such an interesting, fascinating, frustrating, exhausting, beautiful journey. Like it really, really is. So it's worth examining. Chris says, yeah, it's part of what I hate about me, Dana. It's got, Chris, like we were talking about earlier, is when stuff in our external environment manifests and it's not working, like something in our life is not working, whether it's a friendship or relationship, our weight, our bank account, our job, something is not working. It's a reflection of something out of alignment in our internal environment. And while it's frustrating to be like, man, I have all these friends that just take and take and take, or I have all these relationships that are abusive, or when we're seeing these things that are out of alignment in our external environment, they carry with them a message. And so if we can try to replace like that judgment, like you're saying, like, this is what I hate about me. If you can replace that judgment with curiosity and so kind of switching that around, being like, well, why is that? Why am I so trusting? Why am I so naive? And really kind of dig into it. It's going to, and this might be a good thing to do like free writing about. So if you've never tried this before, try it. It's really interesting. It's like asking your higher inner self a question. So writing it to yourself, like, dear self, why am I so quick to trust total strangers? And then you just let it sit there. And then you start writing whatever comes to mind. And it might not make any sense to you. And I'll tell you something else too. If you ask yourself a question, or you write something down and your answer is, I don't know. This is very powerful. I don't know is like a bodyguard, because the reality is you always do know, especially when it comes to emotional things like this. Like, you might not know algebra. I literally don't know algebra. Okay. I'm not like my mind's not playing hard to get. Like, I really don't know like advanced math. Okay. Or I guess algebra is not even advanced math really, but anything above algebra, forget it. I don't know it. But emotional, like deep, like emotional kind of stuff, the answer is you do know, but that's that first gate that pops up to try to keep that real answer hidden. So a way to bypass that is to say, okay, if I did know, what would my answer be? And it kind of tricks your brain into just taking that pressure off of like, I need you to tell me the truth that you've been trying to suppress for so long. You just bypass it. Okay, if you did know, what would the answer be? Or what could the answer be? And that frees you up to allow for more answers. And then you can kind of be like, well, if I did know, I would guess that ... And then you can write those down. It's really interesting, the stuff that can be dug up. Yes, Maria says, my breaking point was, if I'm so good to others, why do I feel like crap? This is not working, Maria. Wake up. This is not working. And it worked. I woke up finally. Yeah. For me, I was talking about this last time. I think like one of the first kind of aha moments for me was crying in the bathroom and being like, what is so wrong with me? Why am I so unlovable? Like, why do I have all these people that treat me like garbage in my life? And, and it was sort of like my inner bodyguard, just that realization of, why doesn't anybody love me? And then realizing I am worthy of love, damn it. Like, I really am. I'm a good person. I do good things for other people. I care. It's not fair and it's not right. I just was so angry and hurt about it. And then it was the realization of, well, if nobody else is going to love me, then I'm going to love me. And then it was kind of that realization of, well, like maybe shouldn't I be doing this all along? And I have told you guys before, like I went out to, I think it was Walmart, and bought a bunch of red towels because that was my color of like, I love me. And I would wrap myself in a red towel when I got out of the shower as a way to hug myself, because I really, at that point in my life, I had nobody. Everybody I'd known, my ex-husband was military. Everybody, I wasn't from New Mexico. Like everybody that I knew was gone. And then going through a relationship like this, I mean, it was just absolutely, it was like the chair had been kicked out from underneath me. And I just didn't realize how out of alignment things were in my life until like probably really, that was like the first major moment of, I need to start loving me. And that's when I began really kind of digging deep and finding my fight and realizing I got to start swimming. Like I felt like I had been out, lost in the ocean, in a dark ocean at night for my whole life. And I had been kind of just floating there. And I didn't know how to get to safety other than to hop into somebody else's boat. And so when somebody else did come along, whether it was a guy that I was dating or whether it was, a friendship or what have you, I would hop into their boat and then be like, oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad you rescued me. And I'll be so good to you. And it's so nice because now you're so good to me. And then when that would start to kind of turn, or I would overgive and then become resentful, like it really got to the point where I either jumped off that boat or I was shoved off. But then I kept finding myself back in that dark water late at night, being scared and feeling alone. And it was the realization of, I need to learn how to swim. That's the solution to this. Not trying to find people that have, a boat or that are going to, somehow rescue me out of this. Like I need to learn how to rescue myself and realize that I'm worthy of, like, I can get my own boat. Like, right. Like I'm worthy of that love. And so it was just a really big, it was a big game changer. Lisa says, yes, Dana, the story of my life. Yeah. It's empowering. It's, you guys can, you've got the power. Like that's it's like the Wizard of Oz, and you're Dorothy, and you realize, honey, you've had the power in you all along. Like you've been waiting for the shoes, you've been waiting for this sign, something else to make you whole and give you power, but really you never ever needed it. Like it's always come from within you. And when you realize that, it's a game changer, and your life just radically changes. Like you're worthy of love, and it starts with you. Love yourself. It's okay to say no. It's okay to distance yourself from toxic people and to do what you need to do to keep yourself safe and sane. It's okay. That's what self-love is. Yeah. Okay. Lauren, great question, says, what do you do after you get screamed at or put down? I have a hard time centering myself. Well, okay. I think I'm glad you bring this up. There is a grounding, kind of a cleansing technique that I learned the other day from this gal. It was funny. I was in Colorado visiting my mom, and I went to get a massage, and somehow we got the masseuse and I got to talking about sociopaths and her relationship, and we just basically talked about that the whole time. But she was telling me all of these different grounding techniques, and it was really, really cool. So anyhow, one of them, and this is very powerful, one of them is to visualize. You can do this in any doorway. I find it easiest to think of it in terms of a doorway, but it doesn't, it can be a doorway that you like visualize in the middle of a room, but visualize a doorway or an actual doorway, and then visualize like like a waterfall coming down over it. And that waterfall, it's not water, it's energy, and it's sparkling and it's white and blue and it's dancing around, and it's just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your whole life. And you want to be in there, you want to walk through it. It's cleansing. It's just the most magical thing. Think about that, and then visualizing yourself like walking through it. And just all of that, everything is just kind of like washed off, and just you're cleansed. So if you're in an environment like you're being yelled at, you're being put down, that would be a technique that you can use. So if you're leaving the bedroom, right, or you're going to take a hot bath, to visualize as you're walking through that doorway in the bathroom, there's that cascade of all of that kind of that energy waterfall right there. And then you're just allowing yourself to just walk through it and leaving all of that muck behind. Really, little things like that can really, really help. Another grounding exercise that you can do is to sit. I find it helpful to sit, but you do what feels right for you. To place your feet on the floor and to visualize, let me take my shoes off, to visualize, to start feeling like the energy in your body, and especially in your feet. And then to pay attention to like the feeling of your feet kind of pulsing. And it's just your pulse. But to feel your pulse as that blood is pumping back up your legs. And then to imagine that kind of in the soles of your feet, that there's all of these little kind of like fern little tendrils, but they're energy tendrils. And then to just like kind of let them go, and let them go into the ground 12 to 18 inches, and just kind of let them uncurl and ground you. It's kind of an interesting exercise. So what it is like you're rooting yourself deep into the earth when you do this. Like you're truly getting yourself grounded. You might find if you do it with one leg at a time, it's really cool. So like if you do it with one leg and you kind of visualize these tendrils, these energy kind of roots going down about 12 to 18 inches or so, or even however deep you want to go, then to pull that leg up and then put that leg next to your other leg, you'll probably find that the leg that you were doing that grounding exercise on feels significantly longer than your other leg. It just interesting. So those are some good grounding techniques. Any type of meditation, sitting calmly and just paying attention, just kind of observing your breath or observing your heart rate. And if you can, and maybe takes about 10 or 15 seconds to pay attention, to become aware of your breath or your heartbeat, can be really good centering things. And then I think too, also realizing that when somebody unloads a bunch of garbage onto you, that's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them. So they might tell you a bunch of hateful, hurtful things. And this is where kind of keeping our self-worth and our hurt feelings in two separate buckets really makes a big difference. So it's normal and understandable to have hurt feelings when somebody tells you a bunch of garbage. but it's a choice. Like, we don't have to let this spill over into our self-worth. We can realize that they're normal, decent people don't go around shredding other people. Like, that this is a reflection of them, not a reflection of us. And we're not going to let it take away from our self-worth. So we can nurse our hurt feelings, but we're not going to let it impact our self-worth. So Lindsay says, are you a victim or a therapist or both? I am a victim, survivor, thriver. And no, I'm not a therapist. I don't know what I am. I am a former, I used to work at a domestic violence shelter, and then I was a psychiatric nurse. And so I've worked with trauma and crisis in many different ways for a very long time. But all of these conversations are just conversations, and they're just, I don't know, people on the road of life trying to figure it all out is what it is, I guess. Lindsay, are you in a support group? And everything that you're saying is very normal. She says, I was a victim for 7 years. We were engaged and we broke up in December, and I'm still so torn up, replaying everything. He was so good at tearing me down and making me feel like it was all my fault. That's what emotional abusers do. And that's exactly how people feel. And they often wonder, like, maybe I could have tried harder. Maybe it really was me, if I could have changed. Because oftentimes there's a kernel of truth in a lot of what they say, but it's wrapped in a big ball of a lie. And it's there's no excuse for abuse. Period. End of story. Like, here's an example. They'll often do things like, oh, you forgot to pack. I don't know. You forgot to pack you forgot to bring the pumpkin pie to Thanksgiving dinner. And then they rage at you and they call you names and they belittle you. Okay. And then you're left, the person's kind of left thinking like, well, I mean, I did forget to bring the pumpkin pie. So, I mean, I guess that was true. And, they called me all these names, and yeah, I mean, I'm embarrassed, and I feel stupid and all of these things. And so maybe maybe it is my fault. But the reality is, even if you forget the pumpkin pie, it doesn't make being belittled or yelled at or ground down okay. So even if, do you see what I'm saying? So even if, like, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay for a person to be angry, but it's never okay for them to be cruel. That's the difference. And yes, it's very common for a person to wonder, kind of like to be rehashing things and try to sort all that out. Lindsay says, we're flood victims in Louisiana. Oh my goodness. So my whole life is literally underwater and I can't afford therapy and I don't know what to do or who to turn to. Well, I'm not sure how you found your way here tonight, but I would encourage you, there's lots of support groups out there for, this is it's emotional abuse. We call it narcissistic abuse, and which kind of encompasses like emotional and psychological and verbal abuse. There's lots of different support groups out there. You can find more information about all of this with my website, which is thriveafterabuse.com. And I also have a support group on Facebook if you're interested. And, but there's lots of different groups out there. So I would encourage you to join a handful and just kind of see which ones resonate with you. I think you'll find a lot of clarity and validation in a support group. Therapy is great for doing a lot of like kind of the deep dive. If you can find a good therapist, it can be great for doing the deep dive on other stuff. But there's a lot of clarity and validation and support that can come from a support group. So I would encourage you to start there for sure. And I'm so sorry that you're going through all this. Like, you really do have a lot going on. Yeah, New Chris says therapy is helpful, but there really is so much available online. Like, there really, really is. And Lindsay too. Okay, so we're doing, for the rest of you guys too, we're doing the book club live stream tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Lindsay, this might be something, if you can make it, it'll be recorded so you can watch it later, but that you might really enjoy. The book, oh no, it's next month. Tomorrow night is The Betrayal Bond, which is still a fantastic book, and it talks about trauma bonds. The book next month is on necessary endings, which is fantastic. So I will see if I can get, my notes on the betrayal bonds are already up on my website, but I'll see if I can get the necessary ending notes out here soon, because that book is just amazing. Yes. Della asks, is there an acronym to remember when you shouldn't make important decisions? Like when you're tired, hungry? Yeah. The acronym is called HALT, which is perfect, right? HALT. Don't make decisions when you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Yes. One of my favorite acronyms. So, okay, guys, let's kind of wrap things up. Oh, wait, Kevin, real quick. Is there a way of checking what book you're reading and when you're doing the book club so I can possibly participate in it eventually? Oh, absolutely. Book club is always the last Thursday of the month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the book club list is on the website under, like, I think there's like a drop down menu, but it's just book club. Like, click on that and you'll see the books that we're reading. And like I said, I need to check with Lucy here and see what books we're reading for 2018. So if you guys want to go to like your local library and like pre-order all of these with enough time, then you can. So, and if you want to be a part of like the book club chat, at least for the time being, because right now we've only got a handful of people, we've got room. But if you're interested, you can email me, deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. And like, I'll let you kind of know how all that happens. Yes. Missouri Cowboy says, is the book club a live stream like this? Yes, it is. So if you're going to be on tomorrow, I normally, for those of you, just FYI, I get on Zoom because it's all broadcast through Zoom. I get on about 20 minutes early so we can get everybody situated in there. So there's like, people can know kind of privacy settings and like how everything works. So you don't have to show your face if you don't want to. You don't have to have your real name on there if you don't want to. Like, you can just participate through your phone. So it's just over the phone, or you can have it like broadcasting, a plant or something behind you. Yeah. So yeah. Allie says, Dana, do narcissists even love their golden child? Well, it's, I think more often than not, it's there is no real emotional depth there. Like with the golden child is only loved as long as they are, and I say loved in terms of being accepted. Like they're only the golden child as long as they live their life inside that box. And because they're the reflection of the narcissist. So once they step out of the box, and if they ever do, and they start showing individuality, and they decide, they're like, you know what, Mom, I'm not going to be a teacher like you. I want to be a firefighter, and they want to do something radically different, then oftentimes the narcissist doesn't like that and they lash out, and then the golden child just, falls out of like their good graces. Karen says, yeah, do you access book club live stream from YouTube? Yes, just like tonight. So once the live stream starts tomorrow night, it'll let you know, it'll give that notification that the live stream has started, and then you just hop on like you normally would. So there's going to be multiple people, like where you see me right now in that screen, there'll be hopefully multiple people on there, and then they'll have the chat going. So you'll kind of hear my 2 cents about things, and then from other people as well. So, okay, so let's end in a kind of grounding, kind of calming, getting centered kind of way. So if you aren't already comfortable, take some time to get comfortable, whether you're in your chair or you're lying down or what have you. Oh, close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you. Let's just take a few deep breaths. So take a deep breath in through your nose. And release it out through your mouth. Let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Filling up your lungs, having the air go to the bottom of your lungs as well as the top of your lungs. And exhale loudly through your mouth. Just letting all of that tension and stress go. So let's do that a few more times. Take a deep breath in through your nose, filling up your lungs as much as you can. And letting it out through your mouth. And in through your nose. And out through your mouth. Feeling the tension just melt away. Melting down your arms, out of your neck, out of your shoulders. Just feeling your body go limp. Letting all of that stress just disappear. And letting your chest open up. And letting the tension and the stress and the anxiety go. Letting your arms go limp as you relax. Just relax into this moment. So peaceful, so still. You are here. You are here. Letting the tension continue to dissipate out of your body. Letting your legs relax, your hips relax, your calves relax, and your feet relax. Let your face relax. If you're holding any tension in your face, let your eyebrows relax, your cheeks, and your mouth. Let your tongue fall away from the roof of your mouth. You are relaxed. You can feel how heavy your body is. I want you to visualize a white, safe, joyful, loving light inside of you. And when you first see it, it starts off about the size of a ping pong ball. It's like a little light in the middle of your chest. And with every breath, it grows bigger and bigger. And that light is healing. It's safe. It's joyful. It's here to help keep you grounded. And let that light grow as big as it wants to grow. Let it fill up your chest and your arms, your stomach, your hands, your hips. Let it make its way down through your legs, your knees, your calves, and your feet, till you can feel that warm, joyful, playful, healing light all throughout your body. You can, of course, move it up into your head. And you can actually move it past your body to where it's just flowing. It's flowing from your fingertips and from your feet. It's moving past your head to where you can't tell if the light is one with you or if you are one with the light. And you're a part of each other. And feel that white light as these energetic cords in your feet, as they stretch out, and they move further and further down, grounding you into this other healing energy that's out there. Grounding you, rooting you deep into being centered, into that other healing light. And in this moment, you are relaxed, you are here, and you are safe. You can feel that energy as it tingles in your hands and in your feet. Knowing that you are never alone, that this energy is always within you, and it always wants the best for you, and it wants to help guide you. And once you feel that healing energy all throughout you and even moving past you, let's go ahead and take a few moments to just send that energy out to other people in the group, out to other people that you feel might need it. And especially all of the flood and the earthquake victims. Letting them know that even though we're far away, that we still care. And giving them an energetic hug. And when you're ready, come on back. Don't forget to give yourself a big energetic hug too. So come on back, open your eyes. Oh, thank you, Maria. I really feel that meeting you guys and getting to do this is just such a gift to me. It's so nice to just meet kind of fellow travelers on this road. I just love it. So with all that said, you guys, thank you so much for joining us and for being here. And I hope to see you tomorrow night. And if not, we'll see you next week. So have a fantastic week. So sending you lots of light and love as always. And you are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and be good to yourself. Good night.